Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This meeting is being live streamed by Chelmsford Telemedia and posted to the CPS website for interested community members to access and watch. In-person public participation will be taking place tonight in accordance with the Chelmsford School Committee Public Participation Policy. Anyone speaking tonight during the public input portion of the meeting is notified the superintendent's office of their desire to speak and have been provided with these guidelines. Upon written request, comments received no later than 12 p.m. on the day of the meeting will also be read and made part of the record of the meeting during the second public comment session. So welcome to this meeting of the Chelmsford School Committee. Our first order of business is to approve our minutes from our last meetings.
Got it. Do we do these separate?
Yeah, do separate, yep.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of the regular school committee meeting on June 18th, 2024 as presented.
I abstain.
I need a second.
second.
Who seconded, Susan?
Susan, say, okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any
I'm abstaining.
corrections and questions? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and Maria's abstaining.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of the executive session school committee meeting of June 18th, 2024. No, there's nothing to present, but yeah.
Second.
Okay, any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
I'm abstaining
And
again.
one abstention. Great. All right, anyone have any good news they want to share?
I have amazing news. We couldn't have celebrated a better 4th of July parade than the last one we just did. It was amazing. We had plenty of candy. People were very excited to see us. I got a lot of feedback that we did a great job this year. Apparently, we're being rated. We're new. But no, it was a good time. It was a very hot day, but I think overall that was a very great parade. A lot of people said that there was a lot of new entries this year of people in the parade, and they thought it was wonderful. We had some staff members here that went for the first time. They have younger children. They live in other towns, and they were like, this was wonderful. Everybody was great. So we're going to have some more people joining us each year in the parade. So we had a great time. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Anybody else?
I just want to thank Dr. Hirsch for putting together all the candy and making sure we had enough. Yep. And then supplying us as we went along to give the candy out, which was really nice as well. So thank you very much for all that. And then for supplying us with all our shirts. Okay?
Yes, making sure everybody has that. We're going to be working on different kinds of shirts, too.
Yes, and I thought you were going to start with good news that we all survived, lived, and made it through the heat,
We did.
which was really good.
All right, anybody
was
else
fun.
have any good news?
I just want to point out, the reason there was probably candy left is I actually held the sign this year and didn't throw candy.
That could be accurate, but there is a candy protocol now.
There's candy
I
protocol.
didn't want to mention that, but I think that's.
No, it's fine. You can throw me under the bus. I am
I
a
think-
net candy giver.
I think everybody else is throwing out a good portion of candy.
I think we even helped out our state reps a little bit.
We did help out our state reps who needed some candy.
We did.
We collaborate.
We're givers.
We are.
All right, anything else on good news? Okay, I don't think we have any public comments. I don't see anybody
we
here.
don't tonight,
Okay, so on to new business.
All right, I'm actually going to just recognize Dr. Hirsch to review the first couple of items. We've had a couple of new administrative hires that she's going to review with you.
Yeah, this actually probably could fall under good news as well, too. So we have hired 2 new school administrators. The really, really good news is we're starting off with the World Language and Cultural Exchange Coordinator that I was doing this whole past year. I'd probably give myself a P-. What do you think, Maria? I don't know.
Oh,
P-
my
this year.
gosh.
So we're very excited. We have Dr. Danya Mahoney, and she comes to us from the Reading Public Schools. She is a world language teacher and also is the department chair at the high school level. So she comes to us with a wealth of experience. She is part of the MAFLA board, which is the Mass Foreign Language Association board, and she presents in multiple places, and she's just very much into not only just world languages, but like access for world languages for all students, including students, special needs students. So that's a passion of hers. So she was one of our top choices, and she already started with us. She started last Monday. She was still here today, so I thought that was really, really good news. I checked in on her, and she's just hit the ground running because she has all that experience, and she also had like a semi-administrative position prior to coming to Chelmsford, so she's familiar with a lot of our, even our online platforms, and she's just working with the teachers. She was doing some hiring today, so we're excited to have her. And then our second, can I move on to the next person? I know
Anybody
that
questions
that's
on the
Catherine, before we
world
move
language?
forward?
Sorry,
Danya?
I was gonna, I know we were looking at a new curriculum. Is she, where are we in with her
Yep.
and that and everything else?
It's all here. I sat with her all last week. So the curriculum already came to the district. We've already labeled it, and teachers have their pieces, their teacher editions and the student editions. They've actually been doing the pacing guides for it. This is part of their summer work. And she was just onto their online platform. She actually is familiar with Wayside. I think I may have mentioned this before. There's not a lot of publishers now of world language curriculum. It becomes more and more difficult. So she's familiar with Wayside, and because she also did some online blogging for them when they were talking about how to incorporate special needs students. So she actually has a podcast with them that she did a couple of years past about how students are incorporated into world languages. So she's on their online platform. I'm transferring everything over to her name. It's wonderful. And she has all of our Google Docs that we created as a district, and she's meeting with the teachers to kind of go over those pacing guides with them over the summer.
The other thing, it would be interesting, but she's not here to ask us about recruitment and, how she's looking forward to making sure that we have really great language teachers, second language teachers.
Yes, she spoke a little bit about that during her interview because we had mentioned it's very difficult to get world language teachers. Because she has so many connections, it's very helpful to Chelmsford, right? And even just working with the college level to make sure we have people going into world languages as their study, and world languages for teaching, not just world languages for another job. And she's also connected with a lot of embassies too, that if we decided to go back to having, working with those partnerships with other countries to have teachers come over here and teach for us like we've done in the past, she has those connections. So
Yeah,
she talked about it. She said it's difficult.
I think so. And the other thing that I think is becoming really difficult in second language courses is that AI is taking over quite a bit in terms of we all know each other's language and so on. It's not there yet. It's going to take quite a few years. But I think it means that more and more culture becomes very much a needed thing to be part of these course offerings. So I'm sure she'll be one of the presenters during the year, and we'll get to ask more of these types of questions. But she's got an interesting field here.
Yes, she
How's
does.
her background with the cultural exchange part of it?
So she did that at her job in Reading, and she has, again, she knows all of the different programs that we use to, like Promotor and EF, and so she has all of those connections. So she's just going to investigate more of like what we've been doing as a district, because we've already started that process. We started the French exchange for next year already, and then she'll branch off and expand it from there.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions on world language? Right.
Moving on to Catherine. Okay, so moving on, we have our new mathematics department coordinator, and that is Catherine Richard, no S at the end. It took me a little while to practice that. And she's coming to us from the Andover Public Schools. She's actually is doing this job currently for Andover. She's been doing it for the past 13 years. So Andover calls them program coordinators. So she has been a program coordinator with Andover. She will be starting with us in August, because she had, by the time we finished up all the interviewing, she had to give notice in her district. So we've started the process, we've onboarded her. She is getting access to all of our online platforms. She will be here, and we're gonna just transfer everything over to her. Actually, Dr. Bayronabon's here for another 2 weeks that she actually starts. So we'll have a little bit of that face-to-face time with him as well to get some answers to some questions that she has. And her experience, she's had an interesting experience too, because she started off as a civil engineer. So that was her original background, and then she moved into the education piece. She's also been at the graduate level for colleges as well. So she's coming from a different aspect, but she's been doing this job for quite some time. She's been a classroom teacher as well. So she's excited to start, but she hasn't started here with us yet at this point. So we've just been back and forth, emailing, basic questions, things that she needs to know about, and just getting our data. She's very data-oriented, so she's looking at all of the data we have and then our internal benchmarking data. So we're very excited to have her start as well.
Any questions on the math position?
Yeah. She worked with our new curriculum at all?
She knows about Reveal Math because they had just completed a curriculum adoption up in Andover, and that was one of their piloting programs. So they didn't end up picking it in Andover, but she's very familiar with it because it was one of the pilot programs.
Okay, thank you.
And I saw she taught at the middle school and high school level. How, I know our emphasis is trying to get to the elementaries.
Yeah, no, she's very well versed in that because as a program coordinator in Andover, she was the K through 12 program coordinator. So she's been working at those levels. She may not have taught those levels, but she works with teachers at those levels and is excited to get back to working with them as well.
Great.
Yeah.
Any other questions on the math coordinator? All right.
Yeah, thank you.
No, it's just good to have a couple of those hires, and we'll talk about some of our other openings later in the agenda, but hiring is going well. So we're in a good place, but we welcome those two on board. Third up tonight, we actually have Tess from DM Group with us, and we're going to do kind of the year in review on some of our strategic plan implementation. Tess was here in the winter. We did kind of a mid-year review. Now we're going to take a look at how our end-of-year data looks we're using iReady data primarily before we get into MCAS data in the fall. But Tess is going to walk us through that.
Great, thank you. Thanks for having me tonight and at the table. I need a name tag next. That's my next step. Yeah, excited to share some of the end of year data tonight. Wanted to make sure you got this data in a timely manner, so that's what we'll be sharing. One thing we won't be sharing tonight is what initiatives we're going to tackle for next year. So we're still in the process of analyzing all of that data, identifying specific areas of growth. And so just naming that, it's not going to be about next year, it's about this year in reflection. You also may see me scanning my notes because we're going through a lot of data, so I have a lot of notes. Great, so just to ground us again in the strategic plan process we've taken, who's been at the table. This is the key group of steering committee members who have been leading each of those priority areas over the past couple of years now. So just huge thanks to them and their leadership. As you remember, the process that we took, so every September, October, and even we'll begin in July and August this year, taking a look at end-of-year data, finalizing what initiatives are going to be put in place to reach those goals, action planning, and then spending the majority of the year just monitoring progress of those initiatives to identify any changes in that throughout the year. So the working structure that we've used and will continue to use for this superintendent, an assistant superintendent really being the leads of the strategic plan, us supporting in project management, outlining any key decisions that need to be made. I showed you that steering committee at the beginning. And then we have subcommittees who really work throughout the year on these specific initiatives. We just had the district leadership team retreat on June 18th, where all subcommittee members came together to look at the data, start that initial analysis. But really, this is important just to show that this work does not just happen at the superintendent's level or even, district leadership level or just the school committee, but really is pushed down to the district. So that's how we've worked together. I've showed this before, just in our meetings, we have a very structured protocol every 6 weeks to review progress on initiatives, ensure the whole committee understands progress on the strategic plan, and continues to make progress. So that's how we've been working together. And really, I just like to go over that structure. One, to show just intentionality of having the right people at the table from multiple levels of the organization and monitoring that progress throughout the year. So with that, I am going to get into the content. So as you remember, this is the structure of the strategic plan you have throughout. We are really going to talk tonight about those goals and initiatives, so the yellow and orange. I'm not going to read your mission and vision to you, but always like to ground here in your long-term aspirations, which leads into your theory of action, focused on district leaders providing that direction, curriculum, et cetera, principals creating a culture and conditions for implementation. You're going to see some positive SEL data related to that. And then teachers making sure students can access all of that to reach your vision. So going into the 5 priority areas, going to go through each of these. I'll go through the goals and initiatives and the end of year data. I'll preface this by saying it's really a mixed story for last year. There were great successes in some areas, some that showed some growth and others that did not grow. And so we'll go through all of that. I will also say this is 2 years now into the strategic plan of 5 years. So it's an exciting time, especially now given the COVID pandemic. When we first set out, it was kind of hard to set targets knowing that we didn't even have 1 year of data in 2020 and had to make some assumptions just based on where kids are. So we're excited to revisit targets now that we have more data. So just wanted to preface that. Great. So let's jump into academic achievement. So this priority at the top there really is focused on that mathematical achievement. So very excited to hear the new individual who will be starting, particularly at elementary and that middle school grade. So a lot on this slide. I'm going to walk us through it. Really what you can see here is did not meet targets for that 3rd grade math and reading, and then that 8th grade math. So metrics at the top here. I'm going to walk through each one. That first metric is measured by MCAS, the student growth percentile. We won't have that till October, so we'll look at that then. Percent of 3rd graders meeting standards in reading, so actually saw a decrease of 4% there in proficiency. 3rd grade math saw a 5% decrease in proficiency, and 8th grade math stayed steady at that 55%. Linda is going to do a full deep dive into iReady in looking at much more than this. And just one thing I want to voice over here. So when we look at 3rd grade scores every year, of course it's 3rd graders in the year we're looking, so it's a different cohort of students. So Linda will look at both, grades, but also follow cohort of students to see if they're growing. The reason, we look at 3rd grade, we know how important 3rd grade is for kids to be reading and trajectory from there. But when you see Linda's data, you'll see different stories than this as well. So Linda has already started, her full analysis with her team of iReady, so we'll have more to share there. The only other thing I'll say here, you can see a lot of the initiatives completed around just, obviously the curriculum will continue to be implemented, but that initial rollout. So this will really free up some space for next year, thinking about, okay, how are we going to target this 3rd grade reading and math in addition to 8th grade to ensure students are improving. So Linda, anything you want to add here before you do your deep
No,
dive?
just you have to keep in mind, this is proficiency, so
Yep.
this is if all students were meeting end of the year standards, right? So it's not growth, it just has the proficiency piece in there. So this is based on where students met end of the year. So this would assume that all students have met all the targets, all their standards, and that's typically not the case in Chelmsford.
Yep. So as I said, Linda has much more detail that she will share, but I think, definitely opportunity here to dig into and these scores. Great. All right. For for the equity group. So this is looking at academic performance for students with disabilities in addition to students who are economically disadvantaged. You'll see here, these metrics are based on MCAS because at the time of setting these goals, we actually weren't able to disaggregate the iReady data for students with disabilities. Since then, we now are able to disaggregate that data. So the team, just to ensure alignment between academic achievement and the equity priorities, we are considering setting specific targets for iReady for students with disabilities now that we have that, but that's why you see no outcomes there. I will say we wanted to provide iReady data as a potential predictor of what scores may look like. However, one caveat that iReady is focused on reading and MCAS also has writing as a part of it. So again, it's not apples to apples. But just to go through this data again, just kind of row by row, so that first, if we look at just percent above MCAS from last year using iReady, the main narrative is that third grade is much higher, eighth grade only slightly, but 31% above where MCAS was last year for third grade ELA, 1% above for eighth grade ELA for students with disabilities, 25% above third grade math students with disabilities, and then a 2% decrease for eighth grade math students with disabilities. When we get into students who are economically disadvantaged, it's 45% above where MCAS was last year, third grade ELA. Eighth grade ELA, 1% above. Third grade math, 16% above. Eighth grade math, 4% above. So again, we can't say what the outcome is till we have MCAS on these specific targets, but overall, third grade seems to be much higher, that eighth grade, and we saw that in the overall data, same story, that eighth grade focus. So really what this is also telling us is next year just looking at what collaboration is happening between the academic achievement priority and equity to make sure that students with disabilities, students who are economically disadvantaged are accessing that same curriculum instruction as all students are. For these initiatives, some completed, some being continued and adjusted. So I'm excited to see this iReady data, but we'll be more excited when we get that MCAS data in the fall. So that was a lot there. Great. Then moving on to SEL. So some real bright spots here. They saw growth or maintained in every area. So that first, third through 5 sense of belonging, 2% increase, 6 through 12 sense of belonging, 2% increase. Supportive relationships that students feel, grades 3 through 5, 1% increase, and in 6 through 12 remain steady. So they are going to be, one thing I just want to call out too, especially the supportive relationships, when you're working in high 80% numbers of student, 89% of students, 86% of students reporting supportive relationships, that is really something to celebrate, and to be able to grow further and maintain is just not something we're seeing right now in school districts post-COVID. So want to celebrate that. This group, given success, will be continuing many of the same initiatives and just adjusting them for the next school year, but excited about the growth we saw there. Human capital, so here mixed story, saw some growth, some decrease. So this is really focused on just teachers feeling prepared to differentiate for diverse student populations and staff. So that first is teachers who feel adequately prepared to differentiate. You saw a 3% increase there. The second was staff feel adequately prepared. So this is other classified staff as well, saw an 11% decrease there. Teachers feeling equipped to provide culturally responsive instruction, a -1% there, and then staff who feel equipped to do that 1% increase there. So mixed bag. Some initial analysis here, we're looking at participation rate, which was pretty low for this survey, getting this data. So just thinking about how to ensure we get accurate representation of this data, and how do we collaborate with principals who are delivering the PD, et cetera. All right, last heavy data slide from me. Great, so then operations and facilities really met a lot of targets here. So that first annual review of capital plans, as you know, 2.4 million approved at the April town meeting, so 400,000 additional. Second, the annual review of maintenance work orders. There was a preliminary review. Jay, I don't know if you want to just talk over the second one here briefly, the annual review of maintenance work orders.
No, we classify this as a growth just because we didn't complete the task that we really wanted to until the very end of the year. So we're at a point, we actually went through the whole work order system, talked about like prioritization of tickets, how long it should take to respond. And we just are kind of wrapping up the draft reporting now. We had hoped to have the final reports done so that we could start looking at them a little bit earlier in the year. But we're just getting the first set of reports now. So we're going to be obviously in a much better place to start next year. We just had so many different capital projects happening last summer, and then even as we got into the fall, it was difficult to focus some of the staff on this particular task. And it took us just a little bit longer to accomplish than we wanted to. But I think we're in a really good place to finish that up over the summer and really start next year off on a strong note. We just didn't hit the mark being exactly done on time, so we just listed this one as a growth area, not necessarily completed or achieved.
I'm saving most of my questions for the end, but I do want to ask, because I think that's the wrong goal listed up above. Could you share what the actual goal is for operations and facilities?
That's my goal.
Oh, that, I am sorry. Yes, I can certainly share that. Hold on one second. Sorry about that. We will get that updated to you.
Well, it's on my computer.
I'm not fluent with a strategic plan yet.
That's
I'm still learning it.
Okay, next time we'll test you. One moment so that I get this correct. Okay. All right, so operations and facilities priority. The district will enhance educational facilities to provide students with safe and modern facilities that support innovative student learning.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Great. Great, so the last one here, just the annual review of building conditions. Yep. Achieve that level 2, so hit that target there. All right, before we dive into discussion, because I'm sure there's many questions, just want to wrap by saying, one, this is a lot of data. We wanted to make sure you have everything, so you can, kind of be thinking about this too over the next month or two as the team is digging in, identifying root causes, planning for initiatives next year. And I will also say, just in summary, as you saw, there's a lot of bright spots, and then there's other areas to really dig into and do some work. I never want to see all red, but I never want to see all green, because that means we probably weren't aggressive enough. And so I think this year we have a balance where there's things that can just continue on as going, and there's others that can really come to the surface now to prioritize to start further growing and hitting those targets. So just as next steps, we, as I've mentioned this, in the process of analyzing that data to address targets. We'll do that in July and then come back with those finalized targets initiatives for next year in August. So I will pause and take any questions.
Questions? Go ahead, Diana.
I have a list. No.
That's fine. I got a pen.
That's the problem when there's a school committee and I have a day off. So One question I have is, you mentioned a low participation rate from teachers, and I just want to clarify, what is a low participation rate from staff?
Yeah, I will have to, let me connect with Diane and just get those exact numbers. I don't want to speak out of turn without it in
No
front of me.
problem. I'm just curious, because there's low and there's low, you know?
Yeah.
If I can help, the other thing that we're looking at is that's a voluntary survey that
Yeah.
teachers take. And the other thing that we want to look back to is like 2 years ago. Did we have particular, say, clusters or schools of teachers or staff respond that maybe didn't this year or not? We just have the initial data at this point, and we're sharing that with you, but we're kind of doing the deeper dive to figure out exactly where the data came from. Again, were there different peaks from who actually reported? And because it is voluntary, what are those numbers? So that's what we'll have. And that's what we're doing our deep dive into before we look at the numbers for August.
Okay, yeah, because it was, I was wondering when you said that, because of course I wasn't even thinking about that when I was first looking at the data, and it just made me wonder how much we can extrapolate from it, obviously, depending on how low it is or how concentrated in certain schools it is, could have a different meaning. But speaking about that slide, about what educators, the human capital slide, I'm curious where or how it was explained to those taking the survey, or what the intention was in the way that it distinguished between differentiation and culturally responsive instruction, particularly given what is a pretty vastly different response in terms of, 37% of teachers feeling prepared to differentiate, but 60% of those same teachers feeling like they can do culturally responsive instruction, just because I think of differentiation as something really hand in hand with culturally responsive instruction. So I was just curious how CRI was maybe described, and if that confidence actually matches proficiency, and that's always a tricky thing to figure out. And related to that, seeing that is a pretty low percentage of teachers and other staff feeling prepared to differentiate for diverse student populations. That feels like a data point I'd love to know more about. Which populations do they not feel equipped? Diverse student populations can have a lot of meanings, so, what do they not feel prepared to do? Particularly since differentiation is such a critical way to close gaps, so. Just kind of advocating, I'd love to know more about that. The other kind of, I will try to give some of my time to other people, but my other, I guess, main question is, I'm curious where the targets came from. So again, sort of new to this. So, for example, I noticed that the target for economically disadvantaged ELA students was lower than the 2023 actuals. So was there an assumption that they'd go down? Were the targets made before we saw the actuals from 2023? And I'm also curious why, or, what's our long-term thought around some of what I still see as like unacceptably low targets for, say, students on IEPs?
Yep.
Noticing that the targets would still mean that more than 3/4 of our students with IEPs aren't meeting standards. And I guess I'm curious where those targets are going, or were they projected as a 10-year growth? I know usually it's a 5-year, I think ours is a 5-year plan, but I'm curious where we got the numbers.
Yeah, that I can definitely, so the other questions on human capital I made note of, so that when we do the August, we can come back with that, because some of it is specifics. For that question, yes, those targets were set 2 years ago at the outset of the strategic plan. So that's why, yes, it looks like one may be lower than what actual was last year. We didn't change any targets last year, just given we had only implemented the strategic plan for 1 year. But now that we're 2 years into the strategic plan and we have multiple years of data, we'll be revisiting those targets. And we can now take a much more systemic approach that we have multiple years. Typically what folks do is you look at average growth, over the past 3 to 5 years, and then add 2 to 3 percentage points would be considered aggressive. However, the art then comes in, as you're saying, like if kids are starting so low and it's just not acceptable, then yes, you would push to be more aggressive, versus if you're at 85, 88%, maybe you're not gonna shoot for, an additional 3%, maybe it's 2%, et cetera. So Short answer, those were set 2 years ago. We'll be revisiting them now with that kind of science and art based on where they are now.
I also noticed that one of the initiatives that was completed was an investigation of what other districts are doing, and I was curious if that might inform an adjustment of our targets or some of our own strategies based on what we see that is and isn't working in other spaces.
So I'm part of this equity group, and I can say, Diana, that one of the problems we had as a group initially 2 years ago was that we were coming right out of COVID,
Sure.
was one. The MCAS, the way that it had been administered, was different during that time. It didn't completely reflect what had been happening before.
Right.
So that created another problem.
Yeah, I remember that.
And the other thing is that one of the initiatives that we had to undertake in this group was actually getting iReady more into the special ed. So special
Got
ed
it.
teachers had actually needed to learn, some of them were, get more educated and
Got it.
have more development on iReady and administering it. And the children, the students, were not getting to use iReady as much as they possibly might need to use it. So that was one of the initiatives. So we're going to have to see what the impact is long-term. But being part of this group, it was very difficult to set those targets
Yeah.
and know exactly where we were going.
Looking at the timing, that makes total sense. I guess what I
Yeah.
was curious about mostly is, are those targets things that can be adjusted midway through?
Oh, yeah.
So it's
that-
not like you're stuck with the targets we
no,
made
no,
2
no,
years
no,
ago for
no.
the remainder of the.
Exactly, and it was actually very interesting because we learned quite a bit about the system. And I know that at one of the last meetings, one of the questions by Bill Silver actually was immense in this area because he talked about the technology and making sure that during the year and not just when the AMCAS is administered, that the technology is being adjusted to meet the IEP requirement for the
Right.
child. So, we've learned a lot throughout this, and hopefully going forward, we can set better targets, and we're going to be able to meet them. But that was part of the problem.
Thank you.
Okay, no, that's okay. Those were actually excellent questions, and I, sitting as part of this group, wanted it to be in like 70 and 80 percentile as a target, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what was said, everything that was said. These targets are something that we are gonna address on a yearly basis, we can change. This was also, I believe, the first year, correct me if I'm wrong, but for the first year, we actually have the disaggregated data. for
Yeah, it was the first year we
special ed
shared it with
and
iReady.
And the economically disadvantaged, so this is like our first time being able to do that, so then obviously that can help us over the summer as we're looking at like what targets can be, and I know your group will do that.
Yeah.
And had done that, but that was a little bit of a struggle because we didn't have that data broken up previously, so we only have the 1 year.
Yeah.
One additional problem with this group is it's hard to identify, which we really shouldn't be doing, who is economically disadvantaged. We can't really say, oh, this is a list of all the students who are economically disadvantaged and share with everyone.
Sure.
So part of looking to see what other districts were doing and trying to figure out what they were doing, we actually came to the conclusion that we actually do quite a bit, sometimes a lot more than what other districts are doing.
Yeah.
But again, they have the same problem, which is trying to keep this group as a group in trying to figure out data and going forward on that. You can't just presume because a student is this, that, or the other thing, that student is economically disadvantaged. So it makes it really difficult to figure that out.
But it is an official designation that the state tracks, although I think I learned at charting the course, they think they just changed the name back to being something other than economically disadvantaged. But it is something, so I guess my thought is that there has to be somewhere that we have the specific determinants for what designates somebody.
The other thing on this particular group is it shifts a lot and changes a lot.
Right.
So keeping track of that is also difficult.
And when people get free lunches, we aren't getting the same percentage of people applying for free and
Exactly.
reduced lunch, which gives us less data. So I get all of those things.
Yeah, all of that, so that makes it a little more difficult. But those were facts we learned along the way.
Okay.
Other questions about the report? Sue? Yes? Susan?
First, I really more have a comment, just because I'm part of this strategic planning progress monitoring. In the academics, while I see the big red circles, the news is not as bad as the circles look, because it wasn't like we fell greatly below the target. So I do want to make sure that that's clear. People don't just focus on the red. But, and I know Linda's going to get into this some more, but in addition to being an actual different cohort of students, we have to remember that the 23 kids had the old math program and the 24 kids have the new one, and that's the new learning curve for everyone. So it gives us something to work toward and look for, but I don't want people to see those red circles and be overly alarmed, because the real information is not as alarming as the red circles look. So I wanted to point that out. I do have two things that I am a little curious about. The SEL part, where it says percentage of students that report feeling a sense of belonging in school across grades 6 through 12. Our actual for 23 was 53%, the target was 58%, the actual for 24 is 55%. So there was some growth, but we didn't meet the target. But I'm just wondering, is that kind of just the nature of kids that age? Is this a Chelmsford thing, or is this more a cultural thing where kids in grades 6 through 12 just have a harder time? Or is this something that's really specific to our district that we have to be concerned about? Or do we take in mind that it's typical of the development of kids that age to not feel they belong yet because they don't know what that feels like?
Yeah, I was
Just
concerned
something
about
to
the same, I
consider.
had the same
Like,
questions.
is it a bigger question than, it doesn't look like we're doing as well as we'd like, but maybe it's a bigger cultural question than that?
This is, no, to your point, this is primarily just to look at Chelmsford data that we get through the Panorama survey. Panorama does also have like nationally normed results. We typically are higher than the national norm in all of these, but we've looked at our own. We certainly, I know the group that looks at this takes into consideration like the national norm data, but because it was lower than ours, we always kind of push ourselves higher. But we could actually just add, for reporting purposes, if we wanted to, a column that kind of just shows like regionally or nationally. I'll have to look and see how the data is broken down. Maybe there's a way to look at like New England or something.
To give us a frame of reference
Yeah,
on
like,
that.
this is what's happening kind of.
That would be great.
Nationally or regionally. We could add that, just to give you a sense of what it's looking at. But this is only our data,
Right.
which is above the norms.
Okay,
begin
that's
with.
good to know that it's still above the norms, because the norms let me know that it is kind of a whole cultural age level thing, not just.
One other question on this, you bring a really interesting point up, because it's 3 to 5 and then 6 to 12. But we don't break down that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? We break down, so how did we figure this out for grades?
That's how Panorama,
That's how Panorama is set up in these grade configurations.
developmentally question-wise.
Because again, they're trying to nationally norm the data, so they have these set up that way. So our third through fifth graders, took a particular survey, and our sixth through 12th graders took a different survey. That's how they keep the.
Okay.
Developmentally appropriate.
Yeah, so
Alright.
6 to 8 and 9 to 12 may have teased out differently if that had been
Yeah.
separated.
And
We
they
just don't
actually
have
do
that.
have school by school and grade by grade
Right,
what the
never
data
showed
is.
us
So
that.
they're digging into that.
Yeah.
When they're doing their groups. I actually have to say, like, looking at that, yes, I'd love it to be a little higher. I think the 58 might have actually just been a little too aggressive of a target in the, just the 1 year as far as the growth is concerned. Because again, the 53 was even much higher, like nationally. And to jump a couple of points, I think is going in the right direction. I'm just questioning if that target might have been a little aggressive, but I'm kind of happy that it's continuing to increase.
Yeah.
But this is information that they're breaking down now for when we get together in August to try to set things for next year, they'll be looking at. But I'll
Yeah,
try
but
to
getting
add
that
other
comparison
stuff.
would be interesting.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, and my other question was about human capital and the staff survey, that the percentage of teachers who indicate that they feel adequately prepared to differentiate for diverse student populations. And Diana touched upon this a little bit about how how well is that definition of the diverse student populations? Because you can talk about diversity ethnically, you can talk about economically, but you can even talk about a diversity among academic levels. And I'm wondering how much of that answer that teachers gave was really looking at a culturally diverse answer, or if they were just thinking that they don't feel adequately prepared to differentiate in general.
Right, yeah, it felt.
I don't know. I just don't know based on that.
No, I agree with
That
you.
was,
I'm like,
that, yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, we'll have to see
See
what
what the exact questions are
Panorama,
like.
yeah, because that's
Yeah.
also a similar platform, Panorama, and how, like, is it just the question? Do they give a little definition of what that means? I'm
Because
not
I'm just
sure,
wondering
so-
what that
Yeah,
really
yeah.
means.
Yeah, no, that's a good question.
So I'm just, as to use the words we use, I'm curious about.
I took a note of that too, so
Yeah.
we'll dig down into that when we look at that over the summer.
Yeah, okay. That was it.
Remember,
John,
with
any-
Panorama, they can use the, look, if they're looking at a specific student, they're gonna see how they measured in, for students, like, you're gonna get that information on the students, how they did on their surveys. So when you're in an SST, you can take a look at how the students are doing academically, and then how they're.
Yeah, but I
social
wonder how,
emotional.
when the
Yeah,
teachers did the
teachers.
survey,
You
how
need
they
Panorama teacher.
interpreted those meanings.
Right.
Or maybe the heading doesn't let us know how the questions actually
Mm-hmm,
got at that.
Yeah, we'll have to see what the questions are.
Yeah.
Ray, a question?
So on the social emotional learning, one thing that I found positive here was the supportive relationships 6 through 12, because I thought the fact that we have this regrouping in the middle school, that they have continued to maintain this level. And even, it's great. This is really good. That's one question. Now, two things going forward. One is, now we know, we see these numbers. So part of this that's being done at this next meeting, would it be to look at, okay, this is what we did, and this is what we now have to do in the future? So it's revamping what the initiatives might be in order to change the data and get it better?
Yep, so there will be two parts. It will be looking at the end of year data, digging into that, and then setting new targets for next year if we
Okay.
need to adjust those at all. And then from there, taking a look at the initiatives and determining, are there any that are already complete? Are there any new ones we need to add to, better meet goals? So two things, targets and initiatives being updated.
Okay, so in other words, we may stay with whatever the initiatives are now, but
may.
change what we're going to do in order to achieve the goal.
Yep.
Is that what it, and then we may add new ones as well?
Yes, yeah, we'll have to see. And so
Okay.
like SEL, for example, some of them had this conversation at the district leadership team retreat where they looked at their data. And yes, like even that, they maintained 86%. That's a red, but like that's pretty good that you maintain 86%. So they're pretty content with their progress. So they're going to continue and make slight adjustments to the initiatives. They're not planning currently to add anything versus other groups who maybe had some decline or anything will be digging in more and determining if something additional is necessary.
Now, throughout the year, we've had presentations by the different schools. And some schools, I'll give one example, Harrington had an incredible initiative on social and emotional learning that maybe works across the district. I don't know. But so when you look at this data, are we going to be able to see it by school?
Oh, yeah,
To
all
see
that
if
data
there's,
exists.
we are,
Yep.
okay, great.
Well, to that, do you want to just touch on the restorative practices piece?
The what?
The restorative practices piece that.
Yeah, so,
kinda came from even that?
So I'm working with Katie Sims and Shannon Bischoff. So Shannon is our department coordinator of social emotional learning and school counseling. Katie Sims is in charge of PE health and family consumer sciences, very long titles in this district. They are having us as administrators, they've contracted through a company to teach us the restorative practices during our retreat, and then we need an additional day. So in the back, if if you go to my office area, there's a lot of books with everybody's names on it. So we're going to go through that whole process ourselves so that it can be implemented, continue to be implemented in the schools that are using it. And then the schools that haven't had a chance to learn about this are going to be able to use that process. And even like for those of us on the central office team, there's a lot of pieces to it that you use. It's not always just for children, right? It's how do we work with other, families and I know I work a lot with students. So we're going to have that training. It's going to take us 2 days to do that. And we're very excited to do that as well.
That's kind of an example of like how the SEL group saw some of the good work that was taking place. I know there's some restorative practice stuff at Harrington and even the high school and other schools. And like that was an initiative that they really want to try to push forward next year. So that will then get rolled in district-wide and everyone will participate in that. So I just wanted to kind of give you that example.
Yes.
The other thing that I'm interested in seeing that we really won't see until the fall is the SEL group spent a lot of time working on transitions and trying to make students and families feel better because we added a transition in the district with the middle school realignment piece. So that was their work over the course of last year. It'll be interesting to see as people now transition for the fall and we take, say, the fall benchmark assessment, like, did our data improve? Did some of those things help? I'm sure we're going to want to continue doing a lot of the stuff to work with transitions, but maybe there's a little niche that we need to tweak or something we need to add or delete or do differently. So that's the work of the groups at this point to kind of see exactly what is working, what needs to be added. Maybe it's something new, maybe it's just like a readjustment to something. But that'll be like really interesting to me just because I know the time and effort they put into that transition work, how the fall benchmark panorama survey will go.
I can also say that on the social emotional learning, on the economically disadvantaged group and so on, one great connection that was made is the importance of the social workers in the whole district. And I know that I personally have been able to see this in action, the work that they're doing in action with a couple of families this year. And the amount of work it takes is immense. Just to move possibly a point, whatever percentage point in the data, but seeing it physically on the ground, actually at work, it has been immense for me to see. I just want to point that out, how important their work is there.
Just to kind of wrap it up and get us to the next thing, on the academic piece, I know Linda's
More
gonna
data.
Going into more stuff, and I understand, looking at that data here, that we're starting from a high point, so it's harder to improve when you're already at 87%. I know the cohorts are different every year, third graders, good group, not so good group. That being said, is there work being done this summer to say, okay, what can we do better? Because we don't, we want to see it go the direction we're looking. What's going to be going on this summer?
You want to go to my last slide on the next presentation, is that?
Sure.
No, well, on the summer right now, I mean, a lot of the work that's just being done is just refreshing those pacing guides and, looking at the data to find out where we have to put our focuses on, like target areas. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the next presentation, especially for mathematics, which grade levels that we have to, focus on. So, yeah, that type of work is happening right now.
That, and I think like even, I'll be really interested to see with the help of the new math coordinator, say, for example, and the math coaches at the elementary level, like the impact that they'll have working with our teachers to really help focus on the instructional piece at that particular level. Linda is going to cover a lot of the kind of the work that's taking place when she does the iReady review. But that's what happens over the summer. It's kind of getting deep into what we have for the data now, doing those deep dives by subcommittee. And then again, figuring out like what needs to change. Maybe there were different, we talk about like the tutoring or the interventionist model. Maybe there's particular groups we need to focus on or target for assistance. We know who these kids are who are struggling based on the reports. So when we're putting our groups together at the schools, I know the principals take that into consideration when they're doing the class, not class sizes, but the class assignments for the fall and things like that to make sure your groupings are appropriate. Special ed will take that into consideration when they're doing the matching of the special ed teachers to the special ed kids coming in. Having that data available day one, or even ahead of time if teachers wanted to look at it, through Panorama is going to be super helpful. Just as an aside, like our tech group, we're in the process of kind of rolling over our system. We're probably a week or two ahead of time this year than we have been previously, which just lets staff then kind of get in earlier to actually see kids and their own kids. So we're trying to do everything we possibly can to just, start the year off right. But between now and August, when we have kind of our retreat to hone in on what the initiatives are going to be, there's a deep diver into this data and figuring out exactly what we need to put in place for the fall. But we have a lot of the elements
We're
already.
also giving professional development to those 2 coaches on the programs that we have. So the 2 math coaches that we hired, that we added for this year, this summer, we're giving them the professional development on, that the teachers received. It's obviously truncated, but about the new Reveal program and then the big ideas so that they're hitting the ground running a little faster than, just learning about it when they walk through the door.
Okay, great. Any other questions?
I just have one more thought. I just want to say, like, Maria brought up something that made me notice something else, which is she mentioned the critical role of staff members that are not mentioned in our theory of action. And I just want to kind of throw out the thought that we mentioned district leaders, principals, and teachers, but there is a very critical number of staff that support our students and are in faculty roles that aren't mentioned by name in this, and not only in the spirit of being inclusive and kind of a semantic argument, but I also think really recognizing with some of these strategic areas like SEL that there are other staff roles that are just as critical as classroom teachers. It may be worth considering, including something like teachers and, student support staff or something like that in the theory of action.
Any other questions on the strategic plans?
I just want to have one kind of wrap-up comment that because I've been part of this every 6 weeks, progress monitoring, I just want to make sure people know, like, we're getting this report now, but all of the people involved in each of these subcommittees are looking at this data every 6 weeks as a whole, so that no one's working in a vacuum, that the academic people are hearing what's going on in human capital, and the SEL people are hearing what's going on in, about facilities and all this, so that everybody's being part of this. And in these meetings, they've talked about making sure that this message and the initiatives here do get trickled down to everyone in the schools, that it's not only the people who attend this that are hearing about strategic plan, that bringing it up all the time at staff meetings and everything else is something that's going to be part of the total culture. So it's not just we're getting this report today. This is a really active, living process that goes on all throughout the school year.
Well, thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Presenting. Thank you,
you.
Maria and
This
Sue
is
for
really great to get a look at
committees
it.
too. So,
Thank you.
right.
We'll get your name tag ready for the next one. Oh, yeah, I was gonna say,
She's so excited to hear
you
your
know what, let me
presentation.
just give her
Yeah,
mine,
let's
it would be so much easier. So is everybody ready for some more data? Sit up, not by hand, you don't have to take a stretch, it's fine. Thank you for having me, we're gonna do a little bit on, tonight about iReady. So, as you know, we usually use 2 different metrics, which is MCAS and iReady, to look at how our students are performing in school. With iReady, as just a reminder, we give 3 benchmarks a year, which is a diagnostic, and that diagnostic is then turned into a platform for students to have individualized learning. And we'll talk a little bit about that personalized learning that students are using, which will be new to you tonight, because I typically do not add that in, but I think it's an important piece because it's something we have to focus on starting next year. So we're going to start off with mathematics first. We're going to be flipping back and forth between math and ELA, so I'll slow it down a little bit. And if you need me to go back, just let me know where your thoughts are at that point. Just as a reminder, it's a criterion reference placement level for iReady. So think of it as even for MCAS, you have almost like that exceeds, meets, partially meeting, and not meeting. This breaks it down into 5 different levels for us in order to find out where our students are actually performing when they take their diagnostics in iReady. So this is just your little reminder piece for there. So this is our performance piece. So what happens is we give fall and spring performance. That's what we're going to be looking at right now. We do give a winter benchmark. That's for our personal piece. But to give you, for tonight, you're going to be looking at fall and spring performance to see how they started and how they ended at the end of the year. We'll see a difference in the amount of students because at the beginning of the year, sometimes our students aren't here when they're taking iReady, or they may have moved out, so that number changes. When you look at growth, the growth is all students that took both fall and spring performance. So that number that's up there is both fall and spring performance. And personalized instruction is how many students have been using personalized instruction K through 8. So, looking at placements year over year, spring over spring, so different cohorts of students. I was gonna bring this up, but it came up earlier in the last presentation. We're starting with the 21-22 school year. As a reminder, that is the first school year we came back to full in-person learning with masks for half a year. So just to kind of orient you, because with COVID, if like other people, I start to forget when it all started happening and how many years it's been. So 21-22 is that's full, coming back full from hybrid learning, in person, masks for half a year. We were able to take them off somewhere around, I think, February. And then it gives you an idea of how students are doing with math for 22-23, 23-24. So although the change is a little bit minor, we are, for the past 3 years, we have 71% for this year of students early on grade level or higher at this point. So that is good. We seem to be steady since COVID. And then to give you an idea of what's going on, this is by grade level to see how students have been doing year over year in the different grade levels. So we're seeing that constant dip around second grade, and then that they start to move forward in 3, 4, and 5. And then when we get, 3, 4, and 5. And when we get to grade 6, you'll see a significant change for those students. And then we see the dip again in 7, 8. I will tell you our focus is going to be on grades 7 and 8 because that is what we're seeing consistently across the board for students when we start to see that change over in math and their performance. But when you look at those numbers, remember, some of those percentages are reduced. So that means the students are going into the next level. So that's a good thing. So even though we still have red up there, some of them have moved into yellow. The goal is to get them from yellow to green and so on and so forth. John, did you have a question?
Yeah, can you go back one slide? So I had a quick question. Look at those kindergarten kids just
I know.
crushing it. That's all I want to say.
They're doing so great.
They're
Now,
doing a
remember,
great job, those
They don't have
kindergarten
2
kids.
years below grade level because there's no 2 years before grade level. The cut score is for our raw score is at 300. So most of our students are hitting that cut score, which is great. They're not the pre-K, but those kindergarten kids, elementary is working very, very
Holding
hard.
up the whole district right there, you guys.
Yeah, that's it. Those are the kids we're looking for.
But a question here on iReady, the requirement for using the iReady program, the amount of time a student has to spend on iReady, does that change at 6th, 7th, and 8th grade from 1 through 5?
No, I have the personalized learning on there. Everybody we as a district recommend 45 minutes.
Okay.
In ELA and 45 minutes a week in math.
And that's in class or out of class?
Most people are doing it in class. They're using it as part of their stations, right? So their station work. So if a teacher's working with a small group of students, those students might be transitioning into another station, and one of those stations could be iReady.
Okay, and this works the same way in the middle schools?
Yes and no. So yes, some teachers are designating a whole class period for it because sometimes that works out better for their schedule. Some teachers are doing it in small spurts. There have been some that send it home. The hard part about sending it home is we have no control once a student leaves the schools, right? So
Right.
sometimes you send home homework and homework doesn't get done.
And I'm just wondering if at those levels, and this would be something to look at across the board in the middle school to see what happens. And I don't know the importance of whether it's important to do it or not. But I remember when my kids were in middle school, okay, what happened is they came home with, they needed to practice, you have to do this amount of time. And I think what happens is at the middle school level, the teacher needs more time with the student to get certain concepts across and so on. So I'm not sure, this is my personal question, whether iReady is really mapping out what's happening to, really, I don't know. Because I think it's not the same amount of use. It's not the same constant and consistent use of iReady. But
But for
anyway.
the most part, it's being used in the classroom, so the teachers are controlling how much time they're using it.
And
I
there
don't know
was
what
a-
happened when your girls were
Right.
in middle school, if they was being sent home at that point. I would
Right.
have to, go back.
And there's also the differentiation when you get to, is it the 7th grade where you have
Seventh
different
grade is,
levels of
for
math?
math is levels. There's 3 levels for math starting in 7th grade.
Right,
So
and
you
is
have
I-ready
honors,
still
accelerated,
involved
and
in both, in
math.
the leveling?
Yep.
It is.
And then this is just, this is proficiency. You're talking about the use of the MyPath program, which we'll talk about. This is actual diagnostics that were given in school, in class, like during a set time.
Oh, I see, okay.
Can you also just keep, I'm gonna go up here because it's the only way I'm
Okay.
gonna talk about this. We're talking about like grade levels and kind of looking about whether their percentages are going up and down. But if you actually look at the cohorts, like this group of kids, 23, 24 third graders, were this group of kids in 2nd grade. And if you look at their numbers,
They went up
you do
significantly.
see that they've gone up. So that doesn't tease it out. If you look at this, it doesn't look so good. But if you look at this,
Versus
and the same cohort,
yeah, that's the way to look
we
at
are
it.
seeing progress. So
I agree.
people need to remember that it's not just
Well,
what does a grade level do, it's
that
what
would-
an actual
yeah.
student.
This is just showing you 3 separate cohorts of
Sure.
students. You do have to follow the
Right,
students.
so if you look at it that way, we are seeing progress among the actual cohorts of kids.
That's a good way to look at it. That's interesting.
Nice job, Susan. Would you, can you? I love it. Okay, so looking at just this school year, how things change from fall to spring, because I think that's important to show some of these groups started off low and then move forward by grade level. So if you look at just the whole district in general, you'll see that, we'd started off, for all, if you wanted kids at end of the year standards, 34%. Look at the jump of all students K through 8 at the end of the school year, just all students that took MCAS, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I-ready. And then when you break it down, again, those kindergarten kids, John, you're going to be very thrilled with kindergarten across the board.
And you can
When
never
you
go
see
wrong.
where some of them started and where they ended up at the end of this year, they've made some significant gains.
Look at that.
You're not going to have all students meeting end of the year standards at the end of the school year. It's just that's in proficiency. You want to be looking at how the proficiency moved. Did they move forward? And then we'll talk a little bit about growth, because growth is important in each one of those levels. So this is K through 5, and then this is what it looks like for 6 through 7. But I will say the 7 and 8 we need to investigate a little bit more of how they're being instructed, especially since they are leveled. So we should be able to differentiate within the differentiation of the classes, because there shouldn't be that big of a gap of their learning in each one of those levels. So that is something that we have on as one of our, moving forward, next steps, is to find out how that instruction is going forward, because we do see that even though they're staying steady year over year, the steady is too low for grade 7 and 8, which is the precursor for setting them up for high school.
And all these numbers include regular ed and special ed?
Yep, this is all students. Yep,
These are still, there's big improvements from the fall to the spring across most of the other grades, though.
Right, but-
Look at 4th grade, right? Like, that's really great.
right.
Yeah.
We're K through 4, we're, getting better and better. 6th grade is doing a great job. 7 and
Yeah.
8, we see that kind of
What's your expected, growth, though? What do you want to see? From 12 to 34, and you're like, oh, maybe all of the other grades are the outliers.
Well, I would want more students moving from at least the red to the yellow and the yellow to the
Oh, those are
lighter
similar, yeah.
green, right?
bottom you
So
wanna-
if you think about it, a lot of those those top green students are your students that most likely in your honors and accelerated classes. It's the level 3 classes
it.
that you'd want to see what's the changes that are happening. Because when we break it down, we can see the actual classes. We wouldn't do that here, but I can see which class was we call it just 7th grade math and 8th grade math. So you're either in honors, accelerated, 7th grade, or 8th grade math. We don't call it level 3, it's just the 3rd level. So we can see that there's not as much movement happening in those
Yeah.
levels. So we have to look at how are they being instructed? And when they don't get it, what are we doing?
Another interesting point would be to look at what other districts are getting, or in other words, nationally, maybe
Well,
even.
nationally normed, I-ready will
these
tell you
grades?
that we're pretty high, very, very high, nationally normed.
Because I often get comments from people, parents of children in the 7th and 8th grade, and these are usually students who are doing well, who tell me that this I-ready, they're way beyond iReady. Like, they don't want to
Well,
be
most
practicing.
most of your eighth graders that are in those accelerated classes have maxed out of the MyPath. They don't do
Right.
iReady anymore, but they still take a diagnostic because you can't exclude them from data.
Yeah,
So they wouldn't be impacted by the use of iReady. They'd be using iExcel.
okay.
So iReady should not be something for them if they're upset by, their students shouldn't be
just
on
a
a MyPath.
diagnostic.
Because they most likely have met end of the year standards and they've maxed out of the program. So we move them on to iExcel, which goes up to grade 12.
Yeah,
You can send them my way too, and I can find out exactly what they're doing. All right, so reading, it's a different story, but we have areas that we have to look at. So again, performance, amount of students that took the test in the fall to the spring. Your growth is all students that took both fall and spring performance, and then personalized instruction is all students using personalized instruction. So we're going to be going through the same topics. So if you look year over year, we are staying very steady in reading. We always did. Even during the pandemic year, we found that we didn't take a final diagnostic in 2020, but our students tend to, like for that 2021 school year, our students have been staying very strong in reading. Typically they do in Chelmsford, but we have that nice steady piece year over year with our students. And then just to get an idea of where that placement looks like by grade level, you'll see that dip that happens in grade 4, right, and grade 5, because the content is probably getting, reading to learn is getting stronger and stronger for those students. And then you'll see, again, a little bit of a bump up for this year in grade 6, but then 7 and 8 as staying strong and steady. We just want to keep moving those kids forward when it comes to each cohort of students going through. So it's good to see consistency, because you wouldn't want to see the ups and downs, because then we'd be questioning what type of instruction is being used, what's happening in these classes. We've seen some of the ups and downs in certain grade levels where we've had a couple of years where we've had a lot of turnover of, like, maybe a teacher going out on a leave, and then we had a substitute, and then the teacher was supposed to come back, and that substitute left. Like, there was one group of 7th graders, I think, that had 3 teachers in 1 year, which is not ideal, but a lot of that is evened out with at our middle schools, which is great. And then looking specifically, this current school year in ELA, if you look at all students, going from 29% to 58% in the higher green, 20 to 19, not a huge jump, but what has changed is that yellow, which is those students that were 1 grade level below, moving more significantly up into the green, and then the darker green, which is great. And same with your students that are 2 to 3 grade levels below. You want to see that movement. And then what does that look like by grade level? Again, John, I don't know what to tell you about kindergarten. Kindergarten's the way to go. But you do see that significant change for some of those different grade levels. And then again, we look at the schools, we look at the grade levels for the schools, the teachers and so on, and we have those conversations. And same with grades 6, 7, and 8.
Same thing, 7 and 8 on the bottom, like you mentioned.
Yeah. 7 and 8, as a former 7th grade teacher, this is their first year where they have 4 teachers that are content area people. It's different. It's a transition year for them. Even when we had 5 through 8 schools, grade 7 is a huge transition year for them. And then 8th graders, I will say this year for our 8th graders across the board, they were tested like it was nobody's business. They took MCAS for 3 content areas. Then they took their iReadies. That's a lot of testing that goes on, and they had the civics test. So they may have been a little test fatigued this spring, and I give them credit. They held strong, but when we've talked about different ways, because that's not going to change for them, maybe administering our iReady earlier for them, maybe designating specific days similar to how we do MCAS, like this is the day everybody's stopping what they're doing, take your iReady diagnostic rather than just in your English class or your math class. So we're going to try and figure out a better way for 8th grade so that it doesn't seem like it's the end of the school year, we're going to test you, goodbye, go to high school, have a nice, we want them to have a good end of the year experience before they transition into high school. But this is our first year with it. So I didn't have this slide in math, and I have it in reading specifically because I know there's a lot of conversation around foundations of reading, so including your phonemic awareness, your high frequency words, and phonics. I wanted to show this because once we get past 3rd grade in Chelmsford, and we put a lot of effort into foundational reading skills because we know it's important, we believe it's important, and we want our students to be strong, that once you get past third grade, our students have their phonics, high-frequency words, and phonemic awareness very solid as they go up through 8th grade. So I know that people are concerned. We have to work on comprehension, and that's going to include vocabulary development. That's my hunch. And it's not just vocabulary development in English and social studies. It's academic vocabulary across all the content areas. So we're going to have to put an initiative in there because we know our students can decode and read. We need to then increase them for their actual full comprehension, whether it's literature or informational text. But in Chelmsford, I can confidently say that our students have a good foundational K through 3 reading skills because we are not seeing any dips in phonics instruction, phonemic awareness, and high-frequency words. So that's the good news, right? Good news story. All the rest of that just lets us know year over year how many students where they made gains in the other domains that we have up there. But we do know that for that, we're not moving that needle on full comprehension. And it's not because they can't read, we have to really focus on those comprehension skills at those levels. So we're going to move on to growth. So that was performance. That's literally how do they perform on an end of the year standard in all the grade levels. So one of the great news here piece with our Y and X here is that our students are in the high performing, high growth quadrant. That's where you want them to be. You want them to be, so this is normed by the 50th percentile for performance, and then growth, it's a little confusing because we talk about MCAS growth and we always say 50 or above. In iReady, because they work with multiple states, it's 100% is 1 year growth. So remember that. Don't get confused when I talk about MCAS. So this gives you an idea of how the schools are performing, and they're all in that high performance, high growth area, and where they fall within those quadrants. And then if you want to see how that looks for grade levels, this is where our students are falling for mathematics when it comes to growth and performance. So this is an important chart for us because when we talk about growth, it's great that students are making 1 year growth, but when you start getting into that yellow and red category, 1 year growth is not going to close the gap. We need students to have stretch growth. They need to grow a year and then some if you want to start to see that movement. So across the board, except for a few areas where you see the light blue, most of our students made at least 1 year growth in all 5 of those domains that we're looking at for mathematics. However, you need them to make that gain and then some. So if you even take like grade 6, for example, they're making higher growth. So that's why you saw them on that quadrant way, way up at the top. It's because their stretch growth is higher than 100%. You want students to be able to do that. But what we're also seeing is that we're seeing higher stretch growth in that early on and mid-level range, not as much as in those lower ranges. We want to see that. That's where we have to put our focuses on, because even though they'll grow, they'll just always be that many years behind. You have to push them even further.
And that, I know John was talking about 7th and 8th grade, it gets tough, but you have to remember that some of these are kids who have been struggling from a very young grade, and because it's hard for them to make a year's growth in a year's time, by the time you get to 7th and 8th grade, that gap, unfortunately, does grow wider and wider. It doesn't mean we shouldn't be trying to do everything we can to help them, but that's what happens, that it just becomes harder and harder for some kids to make that up, even though they are making progress and showing growth. It just, the gap kind of widens for some kids because it's a real struggle.
If you even look at that grade 8 right now, so 2 grade levels below and 3 grade levels below, wow, that, like that 190 for 2 grade levels below, it's almost 2 years.
Absolutely.
That's great for 28 students. But then when you get to 1 grade level below, which is a good chunk of students, those are the students you want to be more than just 100%.
Yeah.
Right? And then you're seeing those huge jumps for the students that are in the green, because again, some of them are in an honors class, some of them are in the accelerated class, so they are naturally going to make those leaps and gains because they're already there and then some.
Yeah.
Right?
If you start, some kids come into kindergarten and we don't see it, with skills that are very low, and they're just lacking experience in things, and it's hard to catch everybody up. I mean, we do a great job. It shows we do a great job, but some of that is just because it's cumulative, unfortunately.
And then, since we have our two focus areas of students that, ELL students and our special needs students, to give you an idea of overall, the stretch growth for all students is 121%. Great, it's a year's growth, and a little more. But when you break it down into, so yes means that they're an L student, and no means that they are not an L student, you're seeing 122% growth for students that are not L students, but L students are only making the 1 year growth. So it will be
There's no
important.
closing of the gap.
It will, yeah,
They're
they'll
making
always.
adequate progress if they were on grade level to begin
Correct.
with.
Correct, so you need that stretch growth, and we have some, and we'll talk a little bit about like ways that they can do that. So we need that stretch growth for our L students, and this is in math, and we'll talk a little when we get to ELA, and then this is the same story here for students, special needs students. So overall, 121%, sure, it's a year and then some, but then you'll see that our students with disabilities are making 1 year growth overall. This is all students, right? So overall, making 1 year, they need more than just 1 year. They need 1 year plus in order to start closing that gap. And the students that are not students with disabilities are making the year and then a little bit more on average. So again, this is average. We look at each individual students. So this is important that students are reaching that stretch growth beyond just the 1 year growth. So reading, again, we're going to go through the same process. You'll see this is where we are. Again, good story, high performance, high growth. Excellent, that's where we want to be. This is how the schools kind of, fall in alignment with it. Yes,
One weird question. Didn't we swap schools and kids around?
We did.
Yeah.
This is-
It's reflected in here, I imagine.
it is, because this is this year's data, so it's iReady data, so that's why it's like
All right, to make
in
sure.
real time. So this is, when we get to MCAS, that's where it's going to be.
Like a lot more, okay.
It's going to get, I don't know what it's going to look like. I'm very excited to see what it's going to look like. But this is where our current
Discoveries.
schools, so there's nothing you have to worry about, like there's no change in data.
Okay, I was just curious.
And then by grade level, you'll see, seventh and sixth grader, like off the charts up there. But this is where the different grade levels lie for reading. So same type of thing, we want to see that stretch growth happening, and you really want to see that stretch growth happening in especially your yellows and red groups, right? But we are seeing a significant difference when it comes to reading. Again, there's a lot of efforts that go into reading. We have a lot of, programs in place. We put our interventionists in place. So we want to continue to see that stretch growth happen so that we can see those students make that change. And it's not just the students that are on grade level. That's easy, right? Students are on grade level, they come in, they're prepared for school, they're ready to go. It's really how do we target the students that are one grade level below and two or more?
I just I think it's really commendable that we're seeing greater than a year and a half's growth with the students who are the farthest behind.
Right. Yeah, that's why sixth grade's off the charts, like right across the board.
Good numbers.
Seventh and eighth is huge too.
It is.
167, 158, that's significant.
Yeah, that's a year and a half, if not more, growth. And then, again, to break it down for your L students, right, so we focus on, English learning. So this is all of our students, so 186 students, they're seeing a year plus growth, which is good. We'd like to see more. A year and a half would be even better. But compared to our regular ed students, not our regular ed students, our students that are not L at 146. So we're seeing bigger gains, again, for our students that are not L students, but our L students are holding strong, which is great. And then for our special ed, we are at least seeing over the 100%. We'd like to see it to be higher. It's obviously not in comparison with students that do not have a disability, but at least it's higher, but we have to push some of those kids more for their stretch growth. All right, so now we're getting into personalized learning because this does affect growth. So with personalized learning, that's the whole My Path. This is what we were talking about. Ideally, that wheelhouse is between 30 and 49 minutes. We are like 45, we ask for 45 minutes of ELA and math It's a personalized program, so this is based off a student's diagnostic, how they perform. So even if I'm, say, in fifth grade, and say I performed in my diagnostic at a fourth grade level, mid-fourth grade level, my path is going to be those lessons at like grade 4 year to help me then, as a building block, get to fifth grade standards. Or if I'm in fifth grade, again, and I'm reading at a seventh grade level, my path, all my lessons are going to be at a seventh grade level, so it's adaptive. And as the students are actually doing the lessons, if they're not doing well, the program will bring them up and down based on how they're doing. One of the important parts here, though, is that they're passing their lessons, and then in each of their domains, if they're not passing the lessons, that they're getting instruction. So, and that's a place where we could focus on as a district. So if I'm in a classroom and, somebody's not passing one of my domains, how is that student then being retaught that domain in order to then pass the lesson? Because if the domain shuts off on them, that's not going to help them. And if teachers or classes are moving on, that's not going to help the students too. So I think we have to dig a little bit deeper instructionally to be like, okay, when a student is not getting that lesson, how do you remediate that? That's, I think, the real root cause of how are they getting remediated, because it's hard. You're trying to teach your class, you're trying to prepare for the next lesson, but at the end of the day, you have to find out the kids that are not getting it, they're not gonna be able to move on. Math's a little bit trickier because math is that, building block, concrete sequential piece. ELA can go back a little bit more, and we'll see that when we get to ELA. But more importantly, we have to make sure all the grades are actually in the range for using the personalized instruction in the first place. Right, we can't reteach students if they're not actually using the program. So that is definitely gonna have to be a focus for next year. And I have some recommendations on how we can focus in on that a little bit more than what we've been doing. So this is, I can tell you, this is an improvement from the previous year because we did make it a focus at the schools, but they really all have to be on average within that little range in order to see that. And it's important because when we do break down the students that just that didn't meet that time, grew 1 year, 1,709, so 1,709 students that did use the program within that amount of time met their stretch growth at 131. So when these are our actual students. So when they use the program, they're meeting that stretch growth, hence they're closing that gap, right? There's the progression. So it is that personalized learning is very important and that they're passing their actual lessons. And then when we look at this for reading, same thing. Oh, sorry, you need to
I
go
just
back?
want to go back and just say, yeah, I found
This
slide
one?
38 really interesting, because to me that suggests that there's like a dosage question, right? Like in terms of the impact, because there's a clear, delineation here. And I'm curious, I guess, I think it was Maria earlier that brought up the question of when students get this. And I know I asked my kids, and they said, we do. My kindergartner said 30 minutes in each subject, I think,
Yeah,
each week.
kindergarten is 30 minutes.
And then my older son said 45 in school. And I've heard anecdotally that some kids are asked to do it for homework. And I'm curious if that is intended to replace the time in school. And the reason I ask that is just because I'm wondering, I know you probably don't have this data, but I'm wondering what it would look like to see whether there is better passing and growth for students doing it in school versus doing it at home. And is there like a perfect dosage? Like there's a point at which, it's diminishing returns if students put in more minutes than that. I would love to see, I would love to nerd out even further with this, but I suspect that may not be available because I'm sure it's not going to tell you
Yeah, we would have to
where a
ask
student
teachers if
took a
it's-
test.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, the test would be in school, but you're talking about the MyPath.
Sorry,
the
not a
homework.
test,
Yeah,
where
yeah.
they did the personalized.
Yeah, that we'd have to get, I know a majority of our teachers do it in school.
I mean,
can tell you that,
I
but-
polled a bunch of parents today. I polled about 75 parents, and something like 75% of them said that they never did it at home. So I'm presuming that all of it was done at school.
I think.
But is it because their kids just didn't do it at home, or they were never assigned it for home?
I'm assuming it was probably not assigned from.
I think in most cases not assigned.
Yeah,
or at
okay,
least
that's
not
how I
assigned
would
as
take it too,
mandatory.
yeah.
Yeah.
At the elementary level, like they use stations a lot more than maybe say our upper middle schools do, right? And that is very much a station. It's part of morning mark. It's part of, any type of, if a teacher's absent, sometimes that's, iReady's a great, have them work on iReady, right? So there's a variety of different ways they're using it. But at the elementary level, and even grade 5 and 6, because they have a little bit more time, and we'll talk about 7 and 8 for a second in a minute. But grade, they tend to put it in a station, so that when teachers are working with small groups of kids, they're either, moving on to, iReady station, and they're doing like a math puzzle station, or if somebody's working with an interventionist, they're with their interventionist, they're with their teachers, so they're a lot more skilled at it, so I don't think you're gonna see it sent home as much.
And that's good, because I would have an equity concern if, like, we saw clearly there's an impact on a student's growth if they do more time on iReady.
Well, younger kids
And I would
don't
have a
have enough.
concern if there's a kid who doesn't have internet at home and they can't do it.
Well, elementary students don't have computers.
Yeah,
We don't
They
send them
may not
home
even have the
at
hardware,
grade
let
5
alone
through
the
12.
connection.
yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly. You would not want to necessarily do that. So I would have to say that majority of them are doing it in school. But there's a clear indicate, because it is, like you said, like we try to do double doses for reading and math. There's some kids, this might be a triple dose, because they may be getting their instruction from their teacher. They might see an interventionist, and they're doing iReady. That's what you want. The more practice and the more, instruction that they receive, the better that they'll be at those levels. So when you look at the personalized learning for ELA as well, same thing, we have to get those grade levels to be, on average, everybody in that wheelhouse between the 30 and 49 minutes, 45, because we like to say that as a district, and you'll start to see that impact, because we know that the students that did use it within their personalized learning and pass their lessons, their growth was higher than the students that did not.
I just want to make a comment, though, about the teacher instruction, too. I mean, there's no doubt that iReady plays an important role in personalized instruction. But I know I mentioned at the last meeting how the Harrington teachers had reported at PTO how they took all this data, they saw that comprehension scores were lower, so they put together a set of modules for teachers to do more direct instruction with the Fountas and Pinnell materials to work specifically on it. So maybe those kids are doing a little less iReady, but they're getting high-quality direct teacher instruction. So I don't want this to kind of take away from the fact that actual face-to-face time with great teacher instruction
Oh, yeah, they would never.
may,
yeah,
like, there may be times where they're doing that instead of iReady, but it's just as, if not more valuable, depending on what's going on. So and they use the iReady data to help them develop that. That's what made them decide to do it. So we don't want to take that away from the teachers.
Oh, it
providing
doesn't.
s-
This is in addition.
Oh, I know
to-
that.
yeah, no,
Absolutely.
This would never, you
Yeah.
have to have their
Absolutely.
regular instruction, and then this is in addition to
Yeah,
help.
I just don't want anyone to take away that we're trying to just put the kids on computers and
No.
that's what we're doing. That There's
like
a lot of
it's like
really.
15, 20-minute intervals here and there
right.
based on how long the station.
And it also enables, that time students are spending on computers actually enables some of that small group instruction time.
Absolutely,
where they
gives
can get
teachers a way to
targeted.
do that while other kids might be doing the iReady. Sure.
Yeah, because interestingly enough, even like the new Reveal program, it has like, it's not iReady, but like when the teacher teaches a concept, one of the stations is like, it's a quick game through Reveal that they actually go on and do. And then they actually have an iReady station, right, to do their personalized learning. But there's a little quick game for them to reinforce it, and it's online. So any of those, it's a great tool for teachers to use, because then they can do their small group.
Right.
So these are just, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just like the thoughts that start to come out. And the reason you'll see one bolded opposed to another is one's very specific to math, the other ones are the same. But we do have to increase that personalized learning time to meet that performance and growth targets across the board. For math specifically, we have to look at the lessons for grades 7 and 8 to find, especially in numbers and operation and algebraic thinking, because those are the two foundational domains for mathematics. For the students to move on. Interestingly enough, though, we kind of crack up every year. We don't really know the answer to it, but sometimes, like, by the time you get to measurement, the measurement lessons, like, it's the end of the year, like, a lot's happening, and our students tend to do pretty well on MCAS and measurement. I'm like, do we even teach them that? But regardless, when it comes to mathematics, numbers in operation and algebraic thinking are your two foundational pieces, similar to your phonics and phonemic awareness. High frequency words are your foundation for reading. this is your foundation for mathematics. So there has to be a piece in there. Now, I will say for 7th and 8th, it is a little bit of a struggle because they don't have the larger math block than your K through 6 teachers do, so it has been a little tricky. So that's why we've been trying to think of, okay, is there, especially even for like the diagnostic, is there a way to, just everybody's doing the diagnostic until they're done? Similar to what we do in MCAS. Start it. If you're done at 9 o'clock, great, you're going on to this. If you're done at 10 o'clock, you're not done yet, you stay until 10 o'clock. So we're looking at different ways to administer the diagnostic and then how to like work in the iReady lessons. So we have some teachers that are doing a great job with it, so we'll use them as kind of like the springboard to be like, this is how I'm fitting it in. This is how it's working in my classroom, right? Because it's always good to hear from your peers. And then we have 3 consultancy times that we do with iReady, which is great. But I will tell you, I think we have to, beyond the consultancy time with them, and this is on me, and the coordinators, is to set up a strong schedule monthly or even like every 6 weeks, like when you were talking a little bit, Tess, about how we meet every 6 weeks, to a month look back on the MyPath, right? Because you have a consultancy meeting and then 3 months goes by and you're like, yeah, I'm going to work on that. And then like the next consultancy meeting comes up and you're kind of like, oh yeah, that's right, I was supposed to be working on that. And before you know it, it's the end of the school year. So you almost need like an in-between meeting time to be like, stop what we're doing, sit with the principals, let's pull up the MyPath, let's see how it's been going. Because then principals and coordinators can have conversations with teachers when they meet as a group, instead of waiting 2 or 3 months. It's just a good touch base. So I'm going to be recommending, and I'm working on a schedule that in between our iReady consultancy meetings with the experts that are looking at our data, we stop and take a look at how students are using the MyPath as that additional dose and see if we have some areas that we have to, is it a grade level? Is it a school? Is it this? So we'll look at the data ourselves. And then part of trying to figure out what those teaching practices are, we're going to have to conduct learning walks to see how students with disabilities, L students, regular ed students are being instructed, to see if there's some ways that we can improve that instruction for students or support teachers that could use some help with that instruction. And then obviously provide professional development to our new educators as they come in. We're usually pretty good about that, but there's been a little, like, we haven't had a lot of turnover, but we're getting to see more and more turnover. So it's always good to grab a group of teachers and just have them go through the process. Some of them come to us already iReady proficient because their district had it. But then if you have a new teacher that, their student teaching, they didn't have any type of online program like this, it's always good to give them that, including our math coaches. So that is part of their PD. And then, again, you're going to see I'm not going to go through all of them because they're the same. The difference for reading, though, is that we have to create targeted vocabulary initiative across all the content areas, because I will tell you, a lot of it's that academic vocabulary, and just taking the time to go through the morphology of words and what do they mean and how do they affect meaning. And then even with your to increase the comprehension, like how to even use text features in general when they're reading. So this is going to be something that we're going to have to put into place in order to see that change in that comprehension, because that is where we're seeing the lowest of the domains in comprehension. And I can answer more questions.
Thank you. I really appreciated this. I feel like I got a lot of new information that was great. I do have one question, and this is a bit of a devil's advocate question, so I actually hope you have an answer. It's not rhetorical, but do we have information that supports that iReady success translates to academic success? In other words, there is an assumption when we say, oh wow, students are growing 163% or a grade and a half in iReady, that means that we're actually closing gaps for them that translate into meaningful, academic learning and progress in other areas. Is there, do we have data yet on how this translates to things like MCAS scores? Do they match? Or is that just an assumption? And then, we know MCAS scores aren't perfect either. So are we seeing that this translates into stronger outcomes for those students?
So yes and yes. So we're seeing, we work with iReady, we give them our data, and they look nationally to see how students are doing, but then they do a correlation for us to MCAS, and we are pretty dead on with MCAS scores. So there's a high correlation between iReady and MCAS. So they've done that research for us, which is great. And then we, with Panorama, because this was my question of the day, of how are students' grades compared to their assessments, right? So how are you getting an A when all of your, and this is not just iReady, like we're looking
Right.
at all their assessments across the board, or how is it that all your assessments are through the roof, but you have a D in this class? Like, is it behavior? Is it this? And then that's why we have like the SEL information, and we have our conduct data in there too. Because all of that was here, 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 and you just had to hopefully think people were pulling it together. So with Panorama, that was my question of the day, and we're starting to see, it's gonna take a little time. We're standards-based for K through 4.
Right.
So we're seeing like higher correlation that way. But what we did for the middle schools is to make that categories to be standards, right? So it's standards-based, but not standards-based, but with letter grades. And we're starting to see that change, because when we're having conversations with teachers, we're like, wait a minute, how are they doing so well here, but then their grades are so low, or vice versa? So that's coming along. It's better in grades 5 and 6, 7 and 8, it's coming along, to see that those grades really represent what a student can do, rather than just, they're compliant, or they brought in some tissue boxes, or like, we need to really know what the grade means, because grades are a huge factor, and they're part of placement. So we need to know what's happening with those students. So yes and yes, those are the two ideas I have now. If there's more, I can bring it to you later.
Other questions?
For the training and development, also consider doing it for long-term subs. I think sometimes in certain
Oh,
areas.
long-term subs, I'm like,
Long-term
subs,
substitutes.
no. They don't
I've
have an
seen,
account.
I've personally seen the impact when you have a long-term sub in an area like a mathematics higher level class
Yes,
for an entire year, and they don't follow the programs that we have. It's a huge impact on that particular group.
I agree.
So long-term subs. But I'm glad to see that about, the teachers that are coming in and how things are changing, and they are changing substantially. Substantially, especially at the elementary level, I am seeing a lot of
Oh,
that.
yeah, they're coming, they're very
So the
skilled.
training and the development is key here.
Yeah.
Great.
Anybody else have any questions?
Thank you for the information.
Yeah, well, thank you.
you.
Yeah.
That's a real-
Yeah, I know
that's
it was a
big
lot,
body
and I'm like,
of work.
how do I break this down?
was
Because it can get overwhelming.
So summer's the time to get these things done.
Love it.
Yeah.
We're a month ahead. I'm loving this, Jay. This is great. We did all this in August last year. This is wonderful.
P plus. All
So I
around.
get carried away.
It's just giving away that plus.
I'm like, I didn't have this on my computer. You bumped me.
Oh, I bumped you off.
All right. I'm going to bring Tess out for the
Oh, you
thunderstorm.
know
You
what?
start from the beginning?
I need- No, I need one, so I gotta find the bookmark.
All of a sudden,
We're going to say
I had it there,
goodnight
like,
to
that
Tess.
Yes, we can say goodnight to Tess if you like.
Good night,
Thank
Tess.
you all so much for
Thank
having me.
Take care.
As always.
I'm sorry, I thought I had it up.
so.
Year in review.
Yeah,
Where's your data? This is all script.
Red circles and your green circles.
I'm coming. I just like to throw this up just as a talking point for people watching on TV. So, what is going on now? Linda.
You get this.
All right, so we're just gonna wing this and do the side by side because I don't know what just give me the P minus now. I don't know what I don't know what
Washed
I
out
did
'cause
wrong.
the other thing was so good.
Yeah.
Linda saved you as
No,
always.
Linda and Tess, honestly, they put a lot of time into putting that data together at year end. And I think it's a lot of data, but it is stuff that we're looking at now. What I try to do is actually, we use this, obviously, for the school department to be able to kind of tell the community what we've been up to, kind of big project and milestones for the year. And then we get to write a little section in the annual town report. So this is information that'll go into the annual town report to just document, what we actually accomplished over the last year. And it's always gone well. So these are just a couple of quick highlights. I'm not going to spend a lot of time reviewing it for you. But obviously, we've maintained and continued a focus on really having strong financial principles. And I credit Joanna and her staff with the work that they do to put together the books for the district and the audits that they go through, just administering the budget on a day-to-day basis really allows us to make sure that the money that we're allocated is spent wisely. It's aligned to the different strategic plan initiatives, that we're able to really not worry about the day-to-day, kind of operations of the finance of the district, and we can focus on some of the bigger initiatives. That's been very well subscribed. I think as a result, we've been able to, earmark some money for a lot of different things that have come up from time to time. The new math coaches this year, we've been able to add different special ed programming in the district, we've been able to grow that language-based program at the middle school level, a whole bunch of things just because of the way we've been managing funds. But at the end of the year, we're going to have about $2.3 million in our special ed reserve circuit breaker account, which is significant. You recall, we put about $750,000 a couple of years back in an extra special ed reserve fund, and that's been accruing interest. So we get about $25,000 of interest a year for basically not doing anything. So that's grown from $750 to $790. That's kind of like a true emergency fund if we ever needed it. Our food service fund has grown to just a little over $4 million. We're actually reinvesting some of that money back into our schools. Joanna and Nancy Antolini work hard to update the different service lines and the tables and the equipment. The kitchen project at the high school is like our major undertaking this year. That's in full swing right now. So we're really reinvesting in our programming to try to put together a top-notch school nutrition program. And then we obviously continue to take in some kids through school choice, and so that account will have about $2.6 million at the end of the year. We've been able to utilize that funding to pay for the one-on-one computer initiative that we have, and also it could be like an emergency fund for the school committee should something come up that we need to allocate funding on. We had the fiscal '25 budget presentation. We typically do that in early February. That follows Town Manager Cohen's recommendation at the end of January. I work closely with Paul on our recommendations, and then the school committee, right after February vacation, takes a look at the budget and allocation for the coming year. And again, I just want to publicly thank the town and town meeting reps. When we did our budget presentation in April, it passed, as I said, near unanimously, 133 to 1. And 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. It was a much more contentious process. I do know the one individual. I've spoken with them offline. That won't happen again, I've been told. But it's been great just to see the town support for the school. So that's well appreciated. This past year, it happened so quickly, but I don't think we can forget the major realignment of the two middle schools, because that was one of the short-term recommendations that came from the second Doran-Whittier study when we were taking a look at a new school building project. A lot of work went into that during the 22-23 school year planning, working with the staff, working with families to transition. And honestly, almost like the full-day kindergarten, when we implemented that about 5 or 6 years back, it went really smoothly in the fall. Certainly, there were kinks and there were things that have to get worked through, but that was a major shift for the district, for families, for kids, for staff. But I think it really is going to pay dividends in the years to come. But as I was looking through the report, I kind of remembered that was a huge thing for us last year. And then right before the holidays, we got the great news that Parker, our SOI, was invited into the eligibility period. It was our 6th year of applying, so that was a major undertaking to kind of get through that first step. We were authorized to take a look at 3 different options, one-for-one grade replacement of Parker, to do a complete new kind of mega middle school, grades 5 to 8 all under one roof, or a third kind of compromise option of doing, say, 4, 5, 6 school, like an upper elementary, lower middle school, to help the town potentially build a new school. Again, town meeting was super supportive in April and near unanimously passed that as well. As I'll report on later on tonight, there's been a lot of work that's gone into that, and it's going to continue, but that was significant for us. That work was aided by the study the committee authorized, bringing NESDEC back in to do the long-term demography and then enrollment projection study. That information is going to be critical as we're working with the MSBA to figure out the exact size of a new school that we're going to be building. That was helpful. I'll report on again later at an upcoming meeting. When we get into the phase with the MSBA to look at the actual enrollment projection, they have their own. We have NESDECs, and we have to kind of reconcile. The NESDEC report and the MSBA's projection were very similar for the grade levels that we're under consideration for, so that's great. We differed a little bit in the outlier years. particularly at the high school level, but for the middle school and upper elementary schools that we're looking at, the numbers within grade levels are very close. So that's going to be excellent for us. We continued our work with DM Group and the district strategic planning process. Completed year 2. We're going to be going into year 3. Again, I won't belabor this, but as you know, Maria and Susan have both talked about as being part of the subcommittee that work on that. There's a lot of focus in this district that goes toward really making sure that the different initiatives that are funded through the budget get their due diligence. They're actually acted upon at the district level, at the school level, right down to the classroom level. So that, I think, has really been a good guiding tool for us, and DM Group has been great to work with. Reported also previously about the special work we did with the paraprofessional working group this past year. We had a presentation at the meeting in June about that work. Excited. We got actually a lot of work happening this summer to kind of have that all come to fruition. But I do think that that's going to help set us up long-term for really addressing some of the equity gap that exists between the special education students and the regular education students in the district. And DM Group, again, was instrumental in helping us work on that. And just in closing, as I was kind of writing the report, just completed my 9th year. So that's pretty significant in a school district to have the kind of consistency and the continuity in leadership. I very much enjoy my time here in Chelmsford and working with the school committee. And I was happy to just provide that little summary of our major activities for the year. Again, we'll share that with the community, and we'll share it with the town in our booklet for the fall. So. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but again, just wanted to provide those highlights for you.
Any questions people have?
Now, is this, this is you're presenting to us the achievements and so on as we go into the review, essentially, okay?
Yeah, this is just to help you even in that.
Yes.
To kind of highlight some of that. I've done that consistently for you.
So I'm going to be honest with you and tell you, one of the things that I always have the hardest doing on the evaluation is figuring out the one that standard they have on the professional culture. That for me is always hard. And it is.
yeah.
And I think one of the reasons is because this is really, it's comprehensive, it's high level. All of these are big accomplishments. And when you're looking at this standard, for me, it's more like on the ground thing. It's the non-visual. It's the thing that, you really can't see, at least the way they word this stuff, what happens. So for example, I'm not seeing all the communications you might have with the principals, the staff, and
Right.
so on, all of those things. So it's hard to determine what this is. So I'm just wanted to ask you if there is something you want to point out in this year that stands out for you on how this particular standard, we should evaluate, or I should, the performance for professional culture and the development of, what are you seeing internally, the things that you did internally that happened here this year that really resulted in great results here? I think one of the things is the middle school, but I'm looking at the entire district and everywhere.
Right. I think it's very difficult, in my opinion, for school committees to evaluate a singular person within the district, because a lot of my work is very dependent on
Right.
the success and the work of others. So I'm successful because the people around me and the people in the schools and down to the classroom level do an outstanding job. So it's very difficult to do that. I think what typically, like even MASC would say, is in something like that, you're not able to get to the granular level because you're not in the buildings on a day-to-day basis. You don't see that. You would have to kind of take into consideration, how, the reports you receive at the meetings. If you go to presentations I'm making in the public, like say the budget hearings, if we go to town meeting for different events, we held the community forum to talk about the new school building. That's something that's like open to the community to come to. It's, how I would like interact with people in those kind of venues. Say, you're not necessarily at, say, like a community coffee or something like that, but like those kind of events is typically how people would say the culture piece would be, how I'm presenting on behalf of the school system to the community.
Okay.
And it is difficult. I agree with you.
It is. It's difficult. I think this year, there's more. For example, on the shared vision, I know on the strategic plan that has been comprehensive and it's gone from top to bottom and so on. But some of these things are just not data-driven. And so it's very difficult for us to be able to look at that. And I wouldn't want to create any other categories except P minus, because you always remember that for eternity.
No,
Okay, well, that came from.
It's not a real thing. Maria made it up for you.
evaluation.
first,
I don't let her forget about it.
I created my own little categories.
She had her own rating.
Yeah, it threw me way off too, because like, I had already had the standard, I was like, whoa, whoa.
Wait a minute.
Can't be throwing changes out there all of a sudden.
This
And
this
the
is
other
it.
thing I would suggest, Maria, too, is like when you're taking into consideration all the information, I'll email you guys over the next day or two the forms and things. But if you ever wanted to just sit individually with me, I'd be happy to review stuff if there's additional information you feel like you need or to talk. I think I'm approachable, and if there's
Oh,
stuff I can do to help
absolutely.
you,
You
I'm more
are,
than
and
happy
in
to.
dealing with, I have always found that you are, and yet you listen. And even when probably you're ready to say, okay, she's overdoing it here, but even you
Don't
do
say that.
listen, and I really appreciate that. I just find that it's hard to do that one.
I know.
Because really, truly, you look at all this is incredible accomplishments, really, in our district. And, it's wonderful, but how do they translate into the daily activity, creating that culture that we are all a part of, and many times we are very distant from
Right.
as a school committee. So I appreciate that, and thank you so much for answering. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Since Maria brought up the evaluation, so you'll send out the form
Yep.
in a couple of days. Then if you
And I'll
could,
send you the timeline again.
yeah, if you could get it back to me, by the end of the month, it has the 26th on here, but, somewhere in the end. And then I'll try to put it all together and give everybody a copy before we meet again, so.
Great.
Right. Any other questions on the, hearing?
Thank you for putting this together, as always, every year.
You're welcome.
All right.
Next up is Joanna, just to give us a little preliminary update with regard to the fiscal '24 closing.
Thank you. So this is the preliminary financial report for fiscal year 2024. I'll present the final numbers at our August meeting. So this is our local operating budget, and which is $70,700,000. We have expended and encumbered almost all of it. 69.4 million expended, that's cash out the door. Encumbrances, so that's open purchase orders of 1.2 million. And when I ran this report, we were so darn close, it was like $190.
I was wondering why you left
Yeah.
out $90,000.
No, well, so this number will change a little bit because we're still closing out purchase orders. You don't want to close them too early. You want to make sure you really did get the final bill, that shipping really wasn't charged, that kind of thing. So we'll be working on that over the next few days. But our intent is to land exactly on $70,700,000 this fiscal year. I'm just going to remind you of some of the things you've been seeing in the quarterly reports and the one-time spending, that kind of thing. Just a reminder, we were favorable this year, and we recognize that early on in some areas, which allowed us to bring to you some recommendations to reallocate funding for one-time purchases. We also received that extraordinary relief for circuit breaker, so that gave us more funds to spend on the local budget one-time items, and put more over to the circuit breaker category. And then you did also approve us prepaying special ed tuitions of up to 1.8 million this year. And we came in, Amy Reese and her team did a really good job of estimating and gathering the invoices, and that came to 1,725,300.
Where does the difference end up? Like between the 1.8 we approved and,
So we will use that to, we had some offsets in the budget, like to the special ed or to the transportation revolving fund, things like that. So the offsets will be less because we didn't go all the way up to the 1.8. Okay.
You authorized up to 1.8.
No,
Yes.
I just said, between that number and the actual
Right.
number where that extra
Right.
money goes in. Okay.
Okay. And then, like I said, we still have a few more things to do with closing out purchase orders. And to land on the number, we will use those offsets between the revolving funds to make sure we come in exactly on our budget. Any questions on the local operating budget?
I had a couple of very tiny questions, and this is purely for my own learning, I think, but so on page 90, well, it's not page 94, it's on page 19 of the budget. I saw civic activities was budgeted 0, and there were transfers, and there was a revised budget, and we spent something like 78,000.
Yep.
What is that?
Okay, so at the June 18th school committee meeting, the committee approved a budget transfer into this category to help fund for the turf field bond payment and interest payment.
Okay, that's what that is.
That's what that is.
I didn't know that was the category.
Yep, that was a category, yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the, pretty much? Oh,
Did you have another?
No, I don't have anything else critical. Nope.
And then the next page is the grant and revolving funds, and again, this is preliminary, because some revenue that, you request funds from the agencies, and like in mid-June, and not all of it has booked by the time I ran this report, so that'll probably be the major change when you see the final report, is more revenue coming in. The expenses and encumbrances are pretty spot on. Yeah.
Right?
any question on the grants?
Okay. And then the last 3 pages are the student activity accounts. These won't change. These were the May reports. So high school still has, 208,000 for student activities. And the McCarthy has 32,000 in student activities, and the Parker has 71,000 in student activities. And then those are all the clubs.
Questions on those reports?
Final will come in August.
Yes, okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joanna. The next one I'm going to ask, Linda, if you don't mind doing, yeah, we actually were early, which is great, with the approval of the student handbook for next year and then the high school addendum.
Sure. So you have in your packet, obviously, the student handbook, which is for all students pre-K through 12. And then the high school has what they call an addendum, because there are other, rules and regulations that go along in order for you to graduate high school. So it's in addition to kind of clarify some of the regular handbook pieces and to add on what happens in high school. Don't worry about the formatting or anything. I'm sure if the numbers are off, they're off. I would do all the formatting at the end because it's just not worth the effort to try and do it at the same time. But beyond just your typical, we see maybe there was a spelling error or a change in a word or something, there were some major areas that got changed, which for both of the both books, which is the dress code, due process under MGH 37 and a half and 3/4, sexual harassment in Title 9, because when we did those last year, we, even like for the due process and for all of those things, we had already approved them before the laws changed. Non-discrimination, transfer of records, non-custodial parents, third-party access, and adding in the language, removing the old language and adding in the CPS Student Empowerment Digital Use Guidelines. So there was a truncation of kind of the preamble of all of those documents that Bill Silver presented to you, and then a link to all of those different documents that he has. So those were the big changes. CHS had a couple of other changes, which included their field trip policy, because we wanted to make sure students were coming in, attending all of their classes. Some kids were not coming in until the field trip was happening or leaving afterwards, so they have to be there. Their summer school, that we don't provide financial aid for summer school, so they added that into their handbook. And then the use of breathalyzers during the school day. And then they did some combination of some of their numbers, like 2.2 and 2.3 to renumber the whole section to truncate some of the things together. So beyond the grammatical, the pagination, the big areas that I told you, the high school had a couple of other things on there. So those should have been the areas you were looking at. These have been run through our attorneys, and they gave their suggestions. If you see that name in there, like Craig, that is one of the attorneys, and reread the whole thing and gave their blessing for these. So this is for your review.
Okay, let's start with the student handbook. Any questions, having gone through it?
I do have two questions on the student handbook. Well, one is more of a comment. It is not going to make me withhold my approval or anything of that for this year, but for future years, I would love to see the word parent be changed to caregiver or say parents and caregivers. It's used throughout, and I think as a best practice toward inclusivity of different styles of families, I'd like to see that changed. It's not something, like I said, I'm not going to say I won't vote for it, but I would like to see that changed. The other is more of an actual question, which is page 123 of our packet, or in this case, page 21 of the handbook.
The student and family one, the big one, not the CHS one, right?
Yeah, this is the student
I'm
family
sorry, what
one.
page was that again?
21
21.
of the handbook. There is a line in here where this is not a new change. Just noting it's not a new change, but it is something that conflicts. I've mentioned this before. I don't want to keep bringing up the same thing a million times, but it does talk about detention from recess, which conflicts with our own policy. The school committee policy handbook specifically states that recess, at least for K to 6, cannot be used as cannot be taken away as a punishment.
Is this under due process?
No, it's under
formal
detention,
consequences.
it's under forms of
Number 1 and
consequences.
2.
Okay.
I hear what you're saying, because at the last meeting, when you brought that up, remember Bill Silva from Technology had something in this thing, and he did go back and change that in his guidelines. My read on this would be, if you had a policy that didn't allow it, then obviously the policy would prevail. But there could be grade levels that it does come into effect. So
Because that
if it's not
policy
in,
is specific
if it's
K to
not in
6.
conflict with your policy, it would be allowable.
In other words, the school committee policy would prevail, but there's still justification for including the possibility of a recess detention because it could apply to older.
This is technically covering K-12.
Yeah, no, that.
So if it
I
didn't
get that.
cover another grade, I will tell you, just as an aside, to make you feel hopefully a little more comfortable, like lunch detentions and withholding lunch and recess and things like that are not the norm. It honestly does not
But they happen at the elementary level.
often.
I have personally experienced it as a parent and was given pushback by a principal when I brought it up, saying, well, it's allowed in our student handbook. And I said, it's not allowed in the school committee. This is before I was on the school committee. I said, it's not allowed in the school committee handbook.
Policy.
Policy, sorry, not handbook, school committee policy manual. And was basically told, then take it up with the school committee. So,
Here you are.
and here I am. So I'm taking it up with the school committee. But I do think that I hear what you're saying about one superseding the other, but it does create a point of a lack of clarity.
I was gonna say, it sounds ambiguous.
Particularly at the K to 6 level. I would be okay with it saying, if it distinguished
Yeah.
age levels here. I do feel like it creates, I can't tell, when I had that conflict, I can't tell you how many other parents reached out to me saying that there's like a lot of complaints from parents about this at a lot of elementary levels. And so it's not just like an isolated incident, you know what I mean? So I would push us to maybe look at not just assuming that one supersedes the other, but actually clarifying that somehow.
I agree.
And then just to add to it, because I'm even more so at the middle school level, I've seen some at the elementary level, but with the new suspension laws and stuff, we have to try other forms of curtailing the behavior prior to going to suspension. And sometimes like we re-educate the student like during that time. And some of the schools, like I know the middle school, they don't really get recess in grade 7 and 8, but like they give them free time and the kids call it recess. So you might see like, oh, my recess is being taken. I'm like, well, you really don't have recess, but some of those things might come up, but sometimes that re-education does happen during that lunch because that's where the incident is happening, right? So it's, again, I don't know what your personal situation was with some of these other situations, but I think the conversation has to have of like, where was the incident and what is actually happening when they are pulled from any type of lunch or recess time, and are we doing something with the students? Because you have to re-educate them. So just
This particular incident was not something that happened during recess. It was like, oh, you were being silly during class, so we're gonna pull you from recess. I'm not beefing about a specific incident, but I do think that that provided an example for how there was a lack of clarity because I was directly pointed to it, the handbook, as justification. So,
What's the problem with adding in a parentheses except K through 6 after,
Yeah.
at recess time, except K through 6?
I think it
Or
would
a
just,
student in grade 7
if
through
the,
12.
yeah, the hard part is that, well, the 8th grade, high school doesn't have anything like that. Because sometimes if the incident is specific to lunch recess, like that's where the student would have to be re-educated because whatever the situation is. It's gonna be hard because we can't really get into the minutia of like individual things. I just think you're gonna find yourself up against something where now that would have been the time to support the student and
That wouldn't be
reteach them.
considered detention then, if it's, you know.
Well, it says recess or detention. Detention is usually from middle school and up.
There's no recess in high school either, right?
No, there's no recess in high
So
school.
what does this apply to?
right.
Like this, what is the
Middle,
point?
K through 6, because
Well, right, but now you're
But if
saying.
it's not allowed in K through 6, then why is it?
Why is it in here at all? So this is you're saying this goes all the way through 12, but in 7, 8, 9,
there
10,
is no
11, 12.
recess to
There's
worry
no
about.
recess to take away. And so this only looks at one, I think that's really confusing. I honestly think, and if somebody's pointed, and also as a parent, and I've been on the school committee a long time, I've heard of other parents telling me about similar things where kids were missed recess. Some of them were clarified with me, some weren't, and it's all anecdotal. But if somebody's pointing at this book and saying, it just doesn't make any sense. This would only apply through K through 6. That's the only thing it could apply to?
I'm trying, give me 1 second, I'm trying to actually just pull up your policy, and I don't disagree with what you're saying. I just have, this has not been my experience.
Section A, file ADF wellness policy is where it was. I looked it up
I
today.
remember that policy. I think we changed that a while
Yeah.
back. We've adjusted
did,
it
and
because somebody else had said something about it.
Yes, somebody came and presented actually an
Yeah.
issue about that at one of the school committee meetings, I remember a few years back. But I don't see if you put except K through 6.
We don't even have to, because you don't have recess
That's the
after
point. There
K6.
is no recess
Or you could
after
just take out
K6.
the at recess
Take out
time.
recess.
Just say
Right.
after school, and then leave it at that.
Yeah,
I agree.
elementary school students don't stay after school.
I know, but the high school students do, so you keep it
My,
in for
my
that.
point is just delete the
And
words.
You just
at
said
recess.
elementary schools don't serve detention, so it doesn't really, the term detention doesn't even apply to elementary schools. So that's, you shouldn't even have it with recess
If
time.
you get rid of the words at recess, I have no problem with
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, I think that's good.
I don't disagree.
5, 6, 7, and 8.
But it shouldn't affect 5, 6 because they're not allowed either.
No, they have, no, I'm saying like if they have a student that's where they're, sometimes that's where they're teaching students on how to behave.
But again, that's not,
But they're not
Then that
losing
does
recess.
And it's not a
they're getting it
detention.
with support.
Something, right, they're not just sitting there, like,
Yes, they're getting it with
To me, that's
support.
different than a detention.
yeah, that's not a
Yeah.
detention.
Right. A formal detention, I just think that take out. with that
Maybe
recess.
calling it a detention is wrong, or recess time detention is
Well,
wrong.
and yeah, I mean, let me look at this. The other thing that can happen, though, is a principal certainly can take away recess, K through 6 or whatever, if a child's being unsafe. They're not going to send a child to recess if the child is acting inappropriately or being a harm to themselves or to other kids. That's not like a detention type thing. That's not like a punishment type thing. But they're not going to send a child out to something like that. I understand what you're saying as far as like a punishment, you did something wrong in class, so we're going to withhold that from you.
Well, that's where, I think just
this
putting
is
it under
totally
detention feels like the wrong place there.
Yeah.
Because if it is a detention, then to me it is violating the
You
policy.
have it labeled as detention.
If
and
it's
then
for
it
the
says
child's
recess time, so
safety,
it's
that's a
really kinda
different thing to me.
contradictory.
It's a good find.
Right, so not taking it out of there as a detention doesn't mean you can't use it if a kid is unsafe or
Right.
you need to be re-education.
Or you're doing some
whatever.
re-educating or
Yeah,
restorative
right.
some.
So you're just not
Then
calling
it's
it a
okay.
detention.
Because if you're looking at the violations, the behavior is not allowed, not all of those are things that would kind of endanger someone, right? Some, there are things we don't want to see happening, but I just feel like keeping it saying at recess is just a slippery slope for confusion, because then teachers say, well, it says I can detain kids at recess.
I mean, teachers know that the policy trumps.
Don't detain them because it's during their lunchtime.
Yeah,
If you want to approve it with an amendment to just remove the words
Yeah.
at recess
Yeah.
time, that's fine. I don't want to delay this.
Yeah.
until the
Yeah,
next
let's do
meeting.
it.
I
That's fine.
agree, I don't want to delay it either,
And then we can look at it more next year if we want to take it out or whatever. I just think taking the words out would help. Hopefully it doesn't come up again this year.
so we're
It
removing
won't
the
come up
words
this
at
year. Well,
recess
not till
time?
next year. Yeah.
Okay.
Other questions on the student handbook? I just one question. I know most of the changes, I understand we've talked about, like the discipline and non-discrimination have all come up. The dress code, where does that stem from? And
So that was, we had, always had a dress code
Yeah.
section, and we were, having the stipulations, but the attorney said you'd be better off using this, because we do have students, especially in the upper, middle, and high school level, that have not been dressing appropriately and covering themselves.
so do we then need to address that at the policy level? Because our policy is like 3 lines of don't dress bad, I mean, do we need to do something?
I don't know if you want your policy to be so specific, because once you do that, then that's easy for somebody to kind of poke at. I think you're better off
A
pointing to the
specific
handbook.
policy, you can find ways around.
Yeah, I'll have to go look back, but it
Well,
was
I
pretty generic.
technically did what you
You
said.
can take a look
Correct.
I was in the Army, I'm
Yeah.
like the master of
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
this came right.
technically following.
And this
the law.
also came to be culturally responsive too.
No, I understand that part
because
too,
there-
right.
sometimes we had in there, no chains. Well, so what happens if somebody had a religious symbol on it? Does that mean they can't wear a chain with we didn't want to step into that. So this was a better language to still address the issues that we have, but not to be exclusive of certain cultures.
So
I actually really appreciated that it called out some things that students may wear. So I think that clarity can be helpful.
But I do think, well, maybe we will look at just the policy,
look
what
at
it
the
says.
policy, might
Because
wanna-
I think it just is really,
Maybe MASC has done some updates too, just given that this
Yeah.
is a hot topic. This is not just a Chelmsford topic.
Yeah.
This is a hot topic around all the school districts.
yes, it
Because you don't want to be exclusive to students and have people making decisions on what they think is appropriate or not. We're really trying to target like the bad things, like things on T-shirts that shouldn't be on T-shirts. Having the clothes covering, that would be great.
and just the other thing was just, on the technology stuff, we Bill presented, I think we all got the email, but I think originally you called technology policies. We just decided we'd call them guidelines, and then they're all embedded, the policies are embedded within them. Just so there was no conflict in terms of what our policy said and what was in there, so. All right, any other questions on the student handbook? Maria, I'll take a motion.
Okay, I move that we approve the 2024-25 student handbook and Chelmsford High School addendum
We didn't do Chelmsford High
With-
School yet.
with the,
We're
oh,
gonna
we
do
haven't
Chelmsford,
gotten to the
yeah,
addendum,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Student handbook with the change recommended on page 21 on the forms of consequence, item 2, removing the words at recess time.
Second.
Very nice motion, by the way.
That was a great motion. That was really solid.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
5-0.
Okay.
All right, moving on to the high school addendum. Any questions on that particular document?
Sorry, it's gonna be me again.
No.
But this is less of something. This is actually a genuine question. Page 53 of the high school policy. I've got to get to it myself, but it mentions 4 levels when above it names 3 levels, and I was very confused, and feel like others looking at this would be confused as well.
Which page, I'm sorry?
It's page 53.
No, I think it's 52. Oh, I have a printout, sorry.
I'm still trying to find my way to it too, because there's a lot of pages here. In our packet, I was talking about page number 238, if you're looking on your school committee packet.
Okay, I see 238.
So it shows AP honors, and then there's CP and CP2. What's the
Yeah,
distinction
so
between
that's for
those?
math only. So math does have that additional level. So, but none of the other departments do, so that's why you see the fourth level.
Okay, because up above, when they talk about there's 3 levels, that
Yes.
confused me, the
Yeah,
distinction.
it's because it was only math. All the other departments removed level 3.
Okay. Thanks. That
Yeah.
makes it clearer. I was like, is this now defunct because it's an old thing? Okay.
Right.
Can I just ask you one quick, where do you see it says up above about 3? I see the page where you're talking the 4 levels now, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm still not finding the page number.
I had to find it by going to 238 of the packet, it was there.
Yeah.
But,
On
you
your computer.
did the
Yeah, you
printed?
don't
I
have it.
printed it out.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the actual when I,
Or if you even want, just tell me after the fact, if you happen to find it.
Yeah, I'm still
just
trying to
curious
find
where
it
it said that.
myself.
Because if there
but-
is something to clean up for next year, we could always clean it up for next year.
Yeah, it's not, this is one of those things, it was a genuine question. It's not like,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not gonna.
it's probably,
for this.
because the majority, everybody except for math has 3 levels. So it's probably in there because that's really going to affect the majority of students. And then the fourth is only for math.
It's page 233, at the bottom of page 233, if you're looking in your school committee handbook, or school committee packet, sorry.
Yep.
48 of the high school handbook. It says level 1, honors 1, college preparatory courses, then
Yes.
on the top of the next page, level 2, college preparatory courses.
I see that.
And then it previously had mentioned AP courses, level AP up above it. So it mentions those 3 levels and
Yeah.
does not distinguish beyond level 2 being college prep. So I just I truly
Yeah,
wanted
she needed
clarity.
clarification
Yeah.
on that.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's not for many students.
yeah. And then another change I saw on the 7th page of the handbook, which would be page 192 of our packet. It mentions, they made one tiny change to the plus block, and no longer mentions directed learning time. Is there a reason for that?
I'm sorry, which page of the packet?
So 192 in our school committee packet, which is page 7 of the
I
high
see it
school,
now, okay.
Page 7.
of the high school handbook, if you've printed it out, yep.
You're talking about the pride block?
Well, yeah, I saw
plus
the
block.
one edit to this page was that it crossed off directed learning time for the plus block, which to me feels like it should be included in it, but maybe it's a bigger change that I'm not aware of.
Okay.
There's a strike through on directed learning time, so I just didn't.
Yeah, because they're not necessarily, so it's not directed learning time. Students can sign up and they go to see their teachers, and then the teachers will help them with whatever they need. So it's not like really directed, it's student directed. So they just got rid of probably directed learning time. Because that sounds like you ought to report to this time and you ought to receive some type of like instruction. It's when the student's like, I need help.
So I wonder if it should say academic support, because if you just get rid of directed learning time, it basically just says they can use the time for social emotional support or to attend school-wide or grade level assemblies.
Right.
It doesn't allow.
Because they have pride block. Pride block is where they get the academics.
Okay, so the plus block really is just used for
Correct, yeah.
SEL and for assembly. That's
Yeah.
why I was asking. Okay.
Back in the day, plus block was supposed to be for like the academic piece, but now that they have the pride block, they're using the plus block time to do their SEL lessons.
Yeah.
And they're using it for if they have to do grade level meetings, if they have to go to a
Some
grade,
was it the guidance counselors and stuff?
guidance counselors can
Got it.
access
So it
them.
really
Yes.
isn't being
It's
used for
not being used
academics.
for
Okay, thank you.
academics.
That's helpful.
Pride block in the next
Pride
page
block
does
is, that's
show
where they
that.
can sign up with the teacher.
But this, to me, was always confusing, and I could never figure it out, even through all the 4 years my girls were there. The difference between pride block and pride and plus block and whatever, so it was confusing. This is very clear now.
Okay, thank you for that, and now it makes sense why it was changed. That was my only question.
Other questions on the high school? A couple small ones. One is, and I don't disagree with, so they added in a line, no outside guests for dances that are over 20. Is that become an issue? Is that, we have to add that in for a reason?
Sometimes
Okay.
people have some much older.
Okay.
Significant
I just
others.
saw that. Yes.
It's difficult, it gets difficult with the proms and things like
Yeah,
that.
okay.
When the
we
dates
have
are
an
over
adults.
21.
Okay, all right, just, I don't disagree at all. And then, somewhere in there, and I'm not gonna scroll through, they now have a highly structured day for discipline. What is a highly
Well,
structured day mean?
that would be,
What is it in lieu of, was it in lieu of in-school suspension? I mean, what is
Yes.
it? Okay, so there's no in-school suspension, but there's a highly structured day?
With the new discipline laws,
Yeah.
you have to do alternative measures
Yeah,
first.
yeah, yeah.
So we wouldn't have, like, we haven't had in-house suspension.
Yeah.
But it would be a very structured day.
Okay, yeah, I just had never seen that term
If they're
before.
not just having an in-school
They're not just
suspension
sitting
where
there,
they
right.
just sit there in
Yeah.
an office, they'd
So it's not
have-
just a semantic change, it really is a different experience.
Yeah.
than-
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a term I hadn't seen before, so I was
And it's to also just give them other alternatives to do.
Yeah.
Prior to suspension
Yeah.
or in place.
Wow.
yeah, the schools have all been working together, like all the, Merrimack Valley area
Yeah.
to be like, what are we, how?
Yeah, you're gonna see a lot of
what
this
are we
stuff in other
doing?
handbooks.
Yeah.
Because they're all kind of working on it together.
Again, good idea, I just
Yeah.
hadn't heard that before, so. All right, any other questions on the high school handbook? Okay.
Can I just ask a real quick question back to the Pride and the Plus blocks? So the kids have this built in their schedule, but it's kind of up to them to decide if they need to go to
Oh, no,
a teacher or
get
up to a
scheduled.
counselor?
For Pride Block, no, so for Plus Block, they report to their Plus Block teacher, it's in their schedule.
Okay.
So, I
It's a
could be,
specific,
right, I could
class
be your
they
Plus
go
Block
to.
teacher, but I may not be your English teacher,
Gotcha,
right?
okay.
But I'm your Plus Block teacher, and that's where they do the SEL lessons, and again, access for,
okay.
counselors, right, or if they have to go to a house meeting, all of the above. Pride Block, they are scheduled, they're going somewhere, but kids usually like, I really need to see my math teacher, I really need to
and
see.
so they
so-
schedule
So
that.
they
so
get
that they're-
scheduled, right, so they're seeing all sorts of teachers, but they use a scheduling system for that, so it's put in for them, so we know where the students are. It's just that it could be different each time that they have a Pride
But they
Block.
have to sign up to do something specific. When
Yeah.
it's their turn for Pride Block, they have to sign up for something very specific.
You got it.
They can't just go hang out and do homework in the cafeteria.
No.
Good, okay.
That wouldn't be structured learning time, according to the Department of Elementary. and
Right.
Secondary Education.
All right, take a motion.
Okay, I move that we approve the 2024/25 Student Handbook Chelmsford High School Addendum as presented.
Second?
Okay, any further comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Have I been taking seconds away from you tonight? Have I been
You
taking?
have, I noticed, but it's okay.
I'm so sorry, that was just like reflexive, I'm just used to doing it.
I don't know that it's officially official who has to do that.
My bad.
Thank you for approving those. So we'll be able to get those translated up to the site. We're ahead of the game this year, which is great for going back to school. The next handbook you have in front of you is the employee handbook. Not too many changes in it this year. Diane Carey made a couple of updates, and then this handbook was reviewed by Attorney Wah's office.
Yeah.
Attorney Nuttall's office did the student handbooks because he handles more of the student-related issues with us, and Andy's office did the review of the employee handbook. So you have that before you this evening for review and approval. And again, similar to this one, like the page numbers may not work in the table of contents because we got to finalize it first. Those will be adjusted in the final version. We didn't update them all because things do change as you format. And then when you try to do the track changes also, it throws things off.
Okay, questions on the staff handbook?
This is just another purely curiosity question. How does the state's policy for paid parental leave fit in with our Family Medical Leave Act, which specifies that parental leave is unpaid, but I thought that through the state, it's now paid?
No, so my understanding of like FMLA and like the state leaves is that you're guaranteed X number of weeks, I'm not sure if it's 12 weeks or something like that, of unpaid time. Our contract actually recognizes and allows people to access the accrued sick leave to pay for, or personal time, to pay for a portion of the leave.
There's a new parental leave law as of like 2021 though for Massachusetts, which I believe requires parents to have 12 weeks of paid leave.
If it is, they're not doing that because my daughter-in-law had a baby and certainly was not given 12 weeks paid time.
A lot of
off,
places
for
have
sure.
not caught up, but this like,
She certainly wasn't given it.
this came up in early, I believe it was early 2021.
You'd have to check to see if that applies to unionized contracts. And
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
so,
municipalities do operate differently.
Right.
than Private sector things.
yep.
I mean,
Have
I'm
the
not a
attorneys check.
legal expert, and I'm sure if a lawyer has reviewed this, that this is consistent with law, but I have talked to a lot of people around my age who have advocated for themselves because of this new law and gotten paid leave, so I just wanted to make sure that we're consistent with.
Yeah, I mean, your attorney, I do believe we're consistent with the law. Your attorney has reviewed this. He's the one that actually handles all the bargaining as well, so he would be
Yeah.
very well-versed in this. I certainly can pass on your concern and ask for a little update or the rationale as to why for you, but he wouldn't have presented something to us that would be.
I'm sure he wouldn't have. I just, that was honestly more of like, how is this consistent? But
Right.
that's.
All right, any other questions on the staff handbook? Okay, take a motion.
I move that we approve the updated employee handbook as presented at this meeting.
I second.
Okay. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Nope. Okay, 0.
Thank you. Next up is just the one thing from Bill Silva from the technology report, was just to approve the device repair cost schedule for next year. And then that would be shared, obviously, in the handbooks. But everything else we talked about just kind of referenced back to the school committee policies. So the only thing we're looking for a vote on is just to approve this tiered repair schedule for the fees.
Any questions on? Okay, and these be part of the guidelines anyways, right? Yeah, okay.
He just doesn't want to put them out unless they're approved.
Okay. No questions? All right, I'll take a motion.
Okay. I move that we approve the repair, the tiered device repair cost schedule as presented.
I second the motion.
Any other questions? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Next update for you is just a little update on how we're doing with hiring for this year. I had mentioned that we would provide one at the meeting, and I hope you agree, we're actually in very good shape for the first week in July as far as hiring is concerned. One of the factors that really allows us to get a lead on this is the budgeting that we do in February and then March, where our budget is approved. We actually then start advertising, and we're one of the first districts out of the gate. A lot of our other districts in the area have been having some financial troubles, late settling budgets, so we've taken advantage of that. And it's obviously worked out for us. But this is just a list of the open positions. There are a handful. I'm not overly concerned at this point. There are several that are listed as long-term subs. We happen to know that we have staff either who have had, say, babies over the summer, who are going to be off for the beginning of the school year, or they might be going out on a family leave in September, so we know we have to be hiring for the long-term subs. We will obviously begin the process now, but oftentimes what happens, the pool for the beginning of the year subs, again, there are anomalies, but typically what will happen is that's the time where you attract some individuals who maybe didn't land a full-time job. They may be recent students, graduated from college. Sometimes it takes time to get your licenses updated in the system. So I'm not surprised if some of those long-term subs aren't filled at this point. The other thing that you do kind of run the risk of is if someone does take a long-term sub job now, they might still be actively looking for a permanent position as opposed to a long-term sub position, and then you end up losing them, a week or two before the start of the school year, and that can actually be detrimental. So this is what we have at the time being as far as positions are open. Interestingly enough, just this afternoon, we actually filled the Parker grade 5 special ed job, so the individual accepted that position, so that comes off the chart. We're really down to just a handful, but wanted to share this update with you. As I indicated, I think we're really in good shape for this. And then as a total aside, we can certainly talk about it another night, but Diane was able to pull together some information for us just on the, I left it at your table, but I emailed it to you as well. Just some of the historical information we have over the last couple of years of data from School Spring, which is our applicant system, on just the ethnicity and the diversity of our hiring. We have the data from '22 and '23 around the pool of applicants for positions. And then she was able to take a look at the actual people who ultimately ended up getting hired by us for those last 2 years. So you have a little bit of data on that, and we certainly can talk about it now or at a future meeting. I just wanted to provide that to you. And then on the last page of the report, she has a little information about just the actual hires that we've made through this particular round of processing. This is some new information that she's asking specifically in the School Spring application portal. The only caveat is this is self-identified information, so people have to volunteer their ethnicity with us when they apply. They don't have to. So that is the only kind of catch on this. But did want to just share that data with you, just to give you some sense of what she's actually tracking, so that we'll be able to produce in the future if reports come out.
Any question on either report, either the open
Yeah, this was like an
positions?
add-on, but I
Yeah.
just wanted to share the information with
I
you.
have
The
just one
opening
question.
report.
Interim kindergarten teacher, what do you mean by interim teacher?
So so this is Center Elementary School, I believe. They have an individual who's taking a year-long leave of absence, but the individual's coming back the following year. So we're looking to just hire like basically a one-year kindergarten teacher.
Oh, but
because
that wouldn't be a long-term sub, it's a
I
different
don't do,
category?
but we don't do that for the whole year.
Okay.
Because the problem with a long-term
It's too
sub is, it's too long and it's not as attractive pay-wise. So if we hire an interim teacher for a whole year, we'll put them on step and lane. So they'll get a full year of service, they'll get a full salary.
They just know that
At the
it's
end of
meant
the year,
to be
they're not
1 year.
guaranteed, because the person's coming back.
Yeah.
It's also helpful for them, too. They kind of get a sense of the school, if someone didn't come back, then they're there. They also might be able to take a look at other jobs in the springtime that might be available to them.
Potentially an
But
internal.
But it's a hire with them
Well, it's a-
knowing that
they know,
it's-
but we can
it's
only
a year.
guarantee
They're
them a
not
one-year job.
expecting to
But
come,
they're not
right.
just getting the long-term sub rate. It
Gotcha.
makes it more attractive to them.
Yeah.
Is the special ed team chairperson a new position, or was that?
Now, that actually, the individual who's in the position just actually resigned last week, so that was an unanticipated opening.
Okay.
So we got that up and advertised, but that was not one we were anticipating.
Okay.
It's not a brand-new position.
Yeah, okay.
So this is something we're going to put on the agenda.
We can ask a question on that.
Yeah,
one.
Okay.
I emailed it to you, but I just didn't know how much time you had to look
Well, I
at it.
haven't had that much of a time to look at it, but looking at it now, I'm looking at it and thinking, okay, this is really interesting information. And if we do a comparison of full year to full year, it'll be great. Because I'm looking at this and recruitment in the last page is only since, it's between 216, it's hiring, between 216 and 72.
That's just for next year.
For next year?
Right.
All right, so, and the page before is 2023, 2 to 23.
Yeah. So you have,
year.
you have two different things. So you have the year that we just finished,
Okay,
and the year prior to that. The applicant pools, just anyone who happened to apply for the jobs is on the first
Okay.
page. And those next two pages are the actual people we hired, so that you can look for
Oh, I
those 2
see.
years.
okay,
And then the last page that just has since 216, that's when we technically started our hiring for next year. We obviously haven't completed it yet, so the data's not complete.
absolutely, sure.
And it's hard to generate a report out of the system for just like a snapshot in time because it's not complete yet. But we'll be able to do that after the year begins.
So in 2022 to 2023, we hired 386 new people,
2022 to 23?
22 to 23, we hired 386 total new people.
Correct. And then you have the breakdown by ethnicity.
And this year so far, we've hired 291 people.
No, that was last year.
That was the year before.
This year,
Okay,
99
got it.
so far.
Well, she's looking at the 23.
Yeah, I know, but
Yeah.
I'm saying this year. on the
Yeah,
last
this
page,
year
yeah.
so far, yeah,
99.
99.
Okay.
This was actually kind of a light year for us.
It is.
hiring-wise, And this is really only taking into consideration the full-time kind of permanent jobs for the fall. When the whole year starts going, we have to hire paras and food service staff and interventionists. So your numbers are gonna start to go up a bit. So
Okay.
this is really looking more
Yeah,
at this
so when we
point,
get an entire year comparison, it'll be good.
better, much
see
better.
how that
And
goes.
Diane is now asking some of these questions.
Yeah.
Which will help us.
Yeah, this is great data.
Yeah, the only thing I want to point out, I do think it's good data. The only thing that threw me a little bit, and again, this is just because it's self-reported, like if you looked on the very first page and you're just looking at your applicant pool, it would almost appear that your applicant pool, say for white candidates, decreased
down.
by, close to 20%. However, it's offset by the individuals who are not providing their ethnicity. So I'm, gonna
Oh, I
make a
see.
wager that some white individuals are not declaring themselves, and that might be why that number is going up. So that then, comes into effect when you take a look at the actual hires for those last 2 years. You have to look at that as well, because technically, it would look like we dropped the hiring of white individuals from 70% down to 46%. But you have to then take the offset, look at the not provided, and
38%
yeah,
not provided,
it's-
yeah.
It's a good number there. So that's the only thing, and again, it's because it's, the employee is self-reporting, and that, so when we get a third year of data, when we get the data for the coming school year,
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see if that stayed or didn't stay, but I did want to point that out to you, because,
But the number of applicants still is less, because when you combine those two numbers, it doesn't, it's okay. That's what's happening all over the United States, the number
well,
of
yes,
applicants
but
is
you do also have
less.
to take a look at, like, I honestly don't know off the top of my head how many positions we hired in those years, like how many
Yes.
jobs we advertised. So I'd have to do a deeper dive into that as well.
It went down, when you look at the total, it went down,
Yeah. We hired less last year than we did the year before, so that makes sense, the numbers would go down.
yeah.
That your applicant
Yeah,
pool will go
yeah,
down because you
yeah.
advertise
Right,
less.
right, yeah. All right, any other questions on either report?
No, but I knew, Maria, I know had asked about this, I know Diane had asked about this too. Is this somewhat helpful or information you were looking for?
It is the information I was looking for, and it just emphasizes that we still have work to do as a district and, building a workforce that better represents the diversity of our student body. But it's helpful to have the data.
Okay, great. All right, last thing I believe is the MSBA.
MSP, yeah, so this is just a quick update for you on kind of where we're at milestone-wise. So we had 8 different deliverables that we had to come through on by December 27th. And so we have 5 of them completed and accepted so far at MSBA. So we're doing good. The last 2, we had to do our educational profile questionnaire, and we had to do the enrollment projection, which was quite cumbersome. But that was very helpful, having the NESDEC report to be able to use, and that's going to be good data for us to inform our discussions with the MSBA. What we wait for now is we kind of gave them a data dump of our information, so they go through that, they come up with their questions for us, and then we hold a series of enrollment meetings, because we have to figure out under each of the 3 scenarios, what would the size of the building be that we're trying to build. So we'll be doing that between now and the end of September. The other report, that's a biggie. The other report is the maintenance and capital planning, so that's something that Brian Curley, our facilities director, and then Christine Clancy and Matt Schweitzer from DPW are working on. That has to go in to kind of document how we maintain our current buildings, to prove that we'd be able to maintain a new building if we build it. That's the other deliverable that's due at the end of September. Those are the 2 biggies on our end. After that happens, because we've already taken the feasibility study vote, usually that's the last step, but we already got that out of the way. So you just need to then put your feasibility study agreement together with the MSBA, and that has the deadline at the end of December. So I think that would actually probably all start to come into play likely before even Thanksgiving. I'm going to think October, November, just because we already took our vote. So I think we're in good shape to be lining up for the January meeting of the MSBA to hopefully then get invited from eligibility into feasibility.
Great.
So just wanted to share those updates with you because we've been working on it, a lot of work's gone into it, and we're in good shape.
Great. All right, thank you.
That's all I have.
All right, any liaison reports? I don't think so. Not this time. Any new items anybody wants?
I just want to make sure we're following up on that, the lunch discussion we had earlier about making sure we're moving towards vegetarian and more accessible food. I like that. We talked before. But essentially, for people that didn't hear that conversation, the nutrition director last week, we're still having that continued problem of children not being able to eat lunch or only being able to eat salad or only being able to eat chips because we don't have like a halal chicken, like meat option, and we don't have a vegetarian option available for kids during the time. And actually, one of the student reps also made that same point. So I just want to keep following up on it. I really love to see that solved before next year.
Yeah. No, I said I'll talk to Nancy when she gets back just to see kind of what her plans are for the menu planning and prep.
I'm sure it's great. I'm sure it's going to be fine. I just want to,
I do know she's working on it.
I don't want it to let it slip until like the end of
No, but it was something she actually specifically mentioned too.
Yeah.
So I do know that this is.
Said she was
important.
thinking about it. I'm just nudging. I'm nudging through
It's
my,
it's
with
important.
my political power, the little power I do have, I'm nudging. So.
Any other?
I would just love to, at some point, have, I don't know if it is already in the plans for next year, but have the new world languages administrator come to one of the school committee meetings. I'd love to ask some questions. I know something I've really been thinking about is all the research supporting kids needing to begin learning a foreign language before the age of 12 in order to fully master a lot of the nuances of the languages, and we don't start till 7th grade. So I'd love to hear if there are any long-term kind of ideas or plans for exposure at the younger grade levels to world languages.
Yeah, just quickly on that, the world language coordinator, our new math coordinator, will likely come to one of our first meetings of the school year just for a more public introduction, so people can put a name with a face.
Great.
And then we'll be putting a whole schedule together for like when folks will be coming in over the course of the year, but we always do that. It's just the summer is hard with scheduling for people.
Absolutely.
But we'll have her in, the two of them, as we get the year going.
That's great.
All right, I have a request. And this could be more long-term, but I know you, Maria mentioned understanding more about professional culture. One thing that might help us before this time next year is if we can get a report a little bit more detail about all the different professional development opportunities that they have at all the different school levels. Might help us to know a little bit more about all that. It's like I'm saying, not really soon, but
They thought they
before
would.
we get to this point next year.
I know. Yeah. They thought they were getting out of here without homework tonight. They're like, look at all this work we did.
I'm
We're
giving them
like, oh,
almost
no,
a
we
year
got-
on this
Got a
one.
month.
Got a month.
Yeah.
No, there's a lot of PD that goes in, so
Yeah.
it could be something we could even just keep I know you would.
Give highlights,
We'll
like,
keep
give-
a,
Yeah, at some point, just to hear a little more detail, because we hear about pieces,
Yeah.
but I would like to just know a little bit more.
We've done that in the past, so.
Just all professional development, correct?
Well, just highlights, like
Oh,
what
yeah,
are the,
not
what are
have
the
every
core
one,
things
but
that-
kind of what the different topics are,
I can do that.
what are people really
not the
leveraging?
exact
What's-
specifics.
I can do that.
I know.
I probably already have a presentation on that.
I know,
In
I
fact, I'll
know
pull it
we've
up
had,
right now.
I know we've had somewhat of a presentation before on what our mentoring program is. I would love that too.
I'm kidding.
Some update on that at some point would be really interesting too, to know what's going on with
Teacher
that.
mentoring?
Because I know it's a lot more
No,
work,
I'm
Yeah,
asking
I
a
think so.
question.
New teacher mentor, right?
teacher mentoring.
Yeah, teacher.
Kill me. I know, but it's
Listen, I don't have a
It's
life.
so, so important.
I this together for you. I don't go anywhere in the summer, so I'm here I am.
Especially, I know, as,
pool.
you know, we've got a lot of we've got new hires, they're not as, we looked at this report just now. And I know, in what I'm seeing in my own profession is that different generations learn in different ways and have different needs. As an HR person told me the other day, she's putting in benefits that she thought were never important in the past, but now are more and more important to these newer, younger generations. And I think mentorship is one of the ways that they learn that was not used in the past as much. So just a thought, and it is a part of leadership too, on mentoring. So I would love to learn that, what we're doing. Sorry,
Okay.
Anything else?
should be quite happy.
come up with something else.
just-
Come on, John.
I got nothing.
Just again, a reminder on the evaluation, and I had my notes. If you're having a hard time, like typing comments in that, put it on a Word document, because that form can be, it's easy enough to put your check boxes,
Yeah.
but you start typing in it, the formatting is crazy. So if you just want to make a Word document with all your comments, whether it's just a single comment in general or in each area, that's, don't drive yourself crazy trying to fill the form in.
And are they working towards a form for, superintendents? Because this form is not great for.
They were supposed to
this
change it up a
evaluation.
couple
The
years ago.
state
and
that
never
gives
really
us
did.
that form?
Yeah.
State that comes up with the evaluation rubric.
Like, how are we supposed to know about the culture in the school? Like, I've always had
There's-
I've always given you like, because I don't know, I'm not in the school. I don't know if the teachers hate each other or love each other or what.
All love each other.
Yeah.
You just,
Or if they love you or.
Well, and it can be, I hear a lot of anecdotal things, but people tend to talk when they're in a bad mood.
Right.
And that's not necessarily accurate, so.
It's correct.
And you learn, we've been doing this for a while too, like sometimes you'll hear something and then you find out the whole story and you're like, oh, that's not what happened at all.
Absolutely.
Right? So, I don't know, I just feel the culture one's hard. Sorry.
No, it's,
is hard.
it's, like I said earlier, it's very difficult, I think, for a committee to do an annual evaluation of an employee who you don't physically like work with in the same building
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah.
I
I think some of them make
do your
sense.
best.
Some of them make a lot of sense.
I'll get you the stuff out tomorrow.
All right.
Oh, and I hope you didn't take that question negatively in any way.
No, I know it's a
just
struggle.
honestly, every year, that is the one that I find the most difficult to do the evaluation on.
Curriculum's easy, I just point to Linda. You get it proficient because Linda exists.
all right, anything else?
Exemplary would be appropriate.
Hey, we don't have any other
Yeah, you
public
get the
comment that I know of,
Oh, I make a motion.
so you're gonna make a motion?
I make a motion to adjourn. I always forget that motion.
I second.
Take
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank
It was
you.
a long meeting.
That was a long meeting.